Hello, everybody, and welcome to Existential Crisis Hotline. Tonight, I'll be talking about. Well, actually, before I tell you about that, I just had some really great barbecue ribs that Katie made, and I had to wolf them down so I can get over here in time. But man, I feel energized. So, I've got some coffee here. Not that I need the energy, but I like to drink it when I'm doing stuff. Ooh, yeah, I put way too much in there. Today, if there's anybody in the chat, you can say hi. I don't know if anyone's in there yet, but just let me know if you are in there so I'm kind of aware. But otherwise, today, what I'm going to be talking about is the concept of God, and like what I had originally planned was the reason why people who believe in God and atheists are always in conflict. I think my camera's tilted or something. I don't know what's going on. There we go. Okay. There's like a weird delay when I'm watching it. I don't know why that is, but it probably doesn't matter. Okay, so hey Sandro, I see you there. Be talking about why Christians and atheists can't get along, why they can't agree, and as part of that, I have a few things I want to play and comment on. Man, I don't really know where to start. But what I really want to get into is this Jordan Peterson versus 20 atheists debate on Jubilee. I mean, it's kind of old. It's like 9 months old. But I watched a few different people commenting on it. And there was just some points that I don't hear anyone else saying. So that's why I want to comment on it. So before I get into that, it was kind of the topic for tonight was kind of inspired by watching this clip that Drake sent me from. It was Nick Fuentes and Dean Withers, and it's an interesting little back and forth. Some of it's kind of annoying because they're just trying to score points on each other, but there is something very interesting about it, and it'll tie in really well to the other stuff I want to talk about. So I'm gonna play that first because it's pretty entertaining. And if you have comments on it, put them in the chat. But I'll pause it every once in a while, maybe, or maybe I'll just let the whole thing play through and give some comments on it. There's this weird. Oh no, now it's gone. Okay, there's like a delay when I have my screen where I can just see me, but when I put it on the screen sharing, it's like gone. That's so weird. I got an Ethernet adapter for my Starlink. And so now I'm running the stream off of hardwired internet. So I think that should help. I bumped it up to 6,000 on the settings. Not that anybody cares what I'm talking about on the bit rate. So hopefully that won't be too choppy. If it looks really choppy, will you guys let me know? If it looks fine. My mic is good, I'm assuming, because you said hi when I asked if anyone's there. Okay, so I'm going to jump into it. This is Nick Fuentes, and let me do that. Okay. I'll turn it up if I need to.
You to rape and kill a baby, would you do it? If God told you to rape and kill a baby, would you do it?
Well, God would never do that because God is good and those things are evil.
Okay, so raping and killing is evil. So when he commanded people to kill the babies in the Amalekites in 1 Samuel 15:3, that was evil?
God is telling us to rape and kill babies right now?
So specifically about killing, in 1 Samuel 15:3, he did command Saul and his men to kill the Amalekite babies.
Rape babies? He told them to rape babies?
No, to kill babies.
Well, yeah, then if I were one of those guys, I would have done it, but not rape them.
Okay, so if God commanded you to kill a baby today, would you do it?
Yes.
Okay, so why would you kill a baby, but you wouldn't rape a baby?
Because that would be cruel or something.
Wait, is killing a baby not cruel?
In the Old Testament, it worked differently.
No, I'm
That's
talking
a
about
fallen
you said
world.
you particularly said that you would kill a baby today if God asked you, but you
If God
wouldn't
told
rape
us, yeah.
rape a baby if God asked you. So how
Not
come you
rape.
kill a baby today but not rape a baby?
Because the context of the Old Testament is that it's a fallen world, and that's the context you're talking about. You said that in the Old Testament,
Dude, we're not
God
talking
said
about
to-
dude. Please
Hang on.
answer
Yeah,
my question.
we
This
literally
is a damning
are.
non-answer.
Well, if
You
we're not
told me
talking about
today.
wait. If we're not talking about the
Give me
Old
30
Testament, what are
seconds.
we talking about?
About the fact that you told me today if God commanded you to kill a baby, you would do it. And then I followed that up by asking you if God commanded you to rape a baby, would you do it? And you
But
said
God
no
wouldn't do that
because
because
that's
it's evil.
cruel. Okay, so killing a baby today, you would do if God commanded it, but raping a baby today.
See, that is kind of weird though, because when he said, "Would you kill a baby if God commanded it?" he said yes. But then if he said, "If you'd rape a baby," he said no. Why? Because God wouldn't command that. Why didn't he just say God wouldn't command to kill a baby? It's a weird thing, and obviously it's this kind of gotcha thing back and forth. But I'm gonna let it keep playing.
You wouldn't do because God wouldn't command it.
Well,
because it's evil.
first of all,
are you making the implication that
first
killing a
of all-
baby today isn't evil?
No. What you said is that in
Okay,
the
so
Old
then you
Testament.
wouldn't do that either, right?
Well, hang
This
on.
is
Hang on.
seemingly a
Let's rewind.
contradiction.
Let's rewind because you said in the Bible God says to rape babies. Can you just
No, I
retract
said
that? Because
kill
that never
babies.
happened. No,
No,
if
I
you
said kill
rewind.
babies.
Yeah, okay. People can rewind the clip. You said kill
Yeah.
and rape babies because you got a
We'll-
and rape
we'll
people
clear
because you
this
got a
up so
little
easily.
ahead of yourself. Because you got a
Nick,
little
we'll
ahead of
clear this
yourself.
up so
That
Nick, I
never
will literally
happened.
clear this up so easily.
Okay.
If I said God commanded Saul and his men to rape babies in 1 Samuel 15:3, I misspoke. In
Okay,
1
thank
Samuel
you.
15:3,
Thank you, yeah.
God commands
But-
Saul and
but
his
see,
men
that's the
to kill
problem.
babies. But you are not answering my question. This is a
I
damning
am.
non-answer. Every single person watching this stream can see that you said if God commanded you to kill a baby today, you said you would do it. Can you affirm
Can we be
that
serious?
fact?
Can we be serious for a second?
We are being dead serious. Can you affirm the fact that you said if God told you to kill a baby, you
Can
do
we
it?
be serious? Can we grow up?
Why won't you
So-
answer my question?
Well, because we're talking about the Old Testament, are we not?
So first of all, I would say Nick Fuentes likes to speak off the cuff and be kind of edgy and sarcastic sometimes. So even when he said yes, I kind of think he was being a little bit facetious, like, yes, I'd do that. So I'm not going to fault him for saying yes to that in that context specifically, but it's his reasoning that he gives as we go on. That's quite interesting.
Dude, we're talking about today. How many times do I need to say that?
You're talking about the Old Testament. You're citing the Old Testament. You're talking about a specific verse in the Old Testament.
Oh my God, this
you
is
can
crazy.
look. You can giggle,
No,
but
I
can
specifically
we
asked
confirm that we're talking about the Old Testament? Is that correct?
No,
What are we talking about?
Exactly. I'll tell you exactly what we're talking about. We are talking about the fact that I asked you a damning hypothetical question. I asked you
It's
if
not.
God
It's a
could,
cheap,
one moment. Do you mind if I have 30
It's a cheap
seconds?
context. No. It's
You're
a cheap
interrupting me
context
because you don't want me to
denial.
talk because you know that you're losing.
Yeah, because the Old Testament says bad things in it. I know. I'm a new atheist, and I just discovered. Here's my answer to your question, if you allow me to answer it. I know you want a cheap gotcha question, but let's add a little context. The Old Testament
Please,
takes
explain
place in a fallen world. We live in a fallen world because we have free will. Okay, God created human beings. Human beings disobeyed God and sinned. Because we disobeyed God and sinned, we have the penalty of death, war, shame, guilt.
All right. Right there. He's trying to make the distinction that it's different in the Old Testament. So things that seem justifiable then are not justifiable now because that was a fallen world. And I think it'd be easy to be like, well, but aren't we still in a fallen world? Probably he would say no. We've been redeemed by Christ's sacrifice and blood on the cross and all that stuff. But, and you can't really argue with that because if they believe suddenly things that weren't moral, that aren't moral now were moral then because of that sacrifice, I mean, how can you argue with the logic of that if that's the assumptions that they're going to make? But that's not really the problem I have with it. I'm gonna rewind it a little bit.
God created human beings. Human beings disobeyed God and sinned. Because we disobeyed God and sinned, we have the penalty of death, war, shame, guilt, pain at birth, all these things.
That's the point I have issue with. Because we disobeyed God, we have the penalty of war. But if I were to say to somebody, well, why is there war? It would because we have free will. Is it because we have free will, or is it because it's a penalty for disobeying God? So is it that we're choosing to do things to continue to disobey God, Or is it because it's a penalty that's imposed on us and we just can't think straight and we just do stupid shit because we were penalized for disobeying God? Or is it just more examples of disobeying God? And if it's more examples of disobeying God, then why would God in the Old Testament give us advice about how to do war? Like, if that's part of the penalty, that there's war and we disobeyed God and that's why we have it, but then he's going to give us advice that we can choose to obey of how to be really good at war and how to win wars. It makes no sense. Like, war is not a penalty of disobeying God. War is a choice that we make because we accept an economic system that is not effective. It's not best. So we create all this debt because we have people who trap others based on a inequality of vocabulary into contracts where they can't get out of it. Their survival depends on it. They don't know how to create. It's not the fault of the person who's creating the contracts necessarily, but that's the system, is we have an inequality and we're not solving that problem. And if we were to just solve the problem of everyone having an effective vocabulary, an effective education, an effective understanding, an equal understanding, for example, those who are at the very top of the system, if they supported everybody who is lower than them to either A, understand the system better, or to support them without taking advantage of the situation, we would have a different world, 100%. There's so much, and if I say, well, look at all the corruption, they say, well, that's because of original sin and so forth. Okay. But it's ironic because the people who are at the top of the system also believe in God. They also justify things based on God, based on Christianity even, based on other religions. So how does, like, it just doesn't make any sense. I don't know if I'm making it clear necessarily, but if we disobeyed God and that's why we have war, then the solution would be, if it's a penalty of disobeying God, wouldn't that kind of tell us, hey, you shouldn't have war? But this whole argument stems from this guy, Dean Withers, pointing out in 1 Samuel 15, it's a story about God ordering the destruction of the Amalekites or something like that. And he says to destroy all of them, women, children, babies, men, like just destroy them all. And I don't really see how God actually helps them in that. I don't remember if it specifically says. Let me look it up. 1 Samuel. Okay, my keyboard's in a weird place. 15:3, I suppose. Let's see. Can I go back one? Okay, so let's see. Jonathan, son of Saul, said to his young armor bearer, "Come, let's go to the Philistine outpost on their side." He didn't tell his father. Let's see. "Come to the outpost of those uncircumcised men. Perhaps the Lord will act in our behalf. Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or few." Let's see. Okay, so Jonathan climbed up using his hands and feet with his armor bearer right behind him. The Philistines fell before Jonathan, and his armor bearer followed and killed behind him. In that first attack, Jonathan and his armor bearer killed some 20 men in an area about half an acre. Then panic struck the whole army, those in the camp and field, and those in the outposts and raiding parties, and the ground shook. It was panic sent by God. So God is involving himself in this battle to send panic into the army. And I guess, let's see. It's more about the battle. That day after the Israelites had struck down the Philistines from Michmash to Aijalon, they were exhausted. They pounced on the plunder and taking sheep, cattle, and calves. They butchered them on the ground and ate them. Someone said to Paul, "Look, the men are sinning against the Lord by eating meat that has blood in it." Oh no. What? They're sinning against the Lord. Like, you're already in a situation where you totally fucked everything up, and that's why you have war, and God's worried about eating meat that has blood in it. You have broken faith, he said. So why are we continuing to be punished for not obeying the Lord if all of this stuff is happening because we weren't obeying the Lord? So God wants us to obey him. So why isn't he just like, look, most of you aren't going to make it, But here's the actual, like, why not just send Jesus right then and there? Why not, after the Garden of Eden, just send Jesus right there? Do it right now. But no, we have this whole story and we have to justify all this stuff because later Jesus has to come when people are ready to accept him, although no one does accept him. No one actually understands what he says. The whole thing's manipulated. And then ultimately, I guess they win this war. I'm not going to read this whole thing right now anyways. The Lord rejects Saul as the king. Where are we at? 15. Did I skip something? I think I might have. Oh, no. 15. Oh, I see what happened. Okay, I went like way too far back. Samuel said to Saul, I am the one Lord that sent to anoint you king over his people Israel. So listen now to the message from the Lord. This is what the Lord Almighty says. I will punish the Amalekites for what they did to Israel when they waylaid them as they came up from Egypt. Now go attack the Amalekites and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put death to men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. So they did it. But the ironic thing is, Saul and the army spared Agag and the best of the sheep and cattle, the fat calves and lambs, everything that was good. So they killed all the children, but they spared Agag, who I guess is the king, and the cattle, and the sheep and the fat calves and lambs. These they were unwilling to destroy completely, but everything that was despised and weak, they totally destroyed. Okay, so they're obeying God. Well, they weren't obeying God. Then the word of the Lord came to Samuel. I regret that I have made Saul king, because he has turned away from me and has not carried out my instructions. Samuel was angry, and he cried out. So he didn't carry out his instructions, meaning he didn't kill everything. He killed everything that was weak, everything that was despised. He kept the king, the sheep, the cattle, and the calves. Samuel said, Lord bless you, I have carried out the Lord's instructions. What is this bleating of the sheep in my ear? Said Samuel. What is this lowing of cattle I hear? Saul answered, the soldiers brought them in from the Amalekites. They spared the best sheep and cattle to sacrifice to the Lord, but we destroyed everything. Enough, Samuel said. Let me tell you what the Lord told me. And basically, they argue back and forth. He said, I did obey him. I went on the mission. I completely destroyed everything. I brought back their king. I brought the soldiers back and the plunder. And I was going to sacrifice all that stuff to God anyways. And he says, does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obeying the Lord? To obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed is better than the fat of rams. For rebellion is like the sin of divination, and arrogance like the evil of idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you as king. I have sinned. I have violated the Lord's command and your instructions. So when I look at this, it's like, it's all just about obeying the authority no matter what. That's all it is. And it's ironic because if you study, Christian apologetics, one of the arguments that's made about why you have to have God or why God is obviously real is because if you don't, then there's no objective basis for morality. Right? I'm going to play a little clip here. I haven't watched this whole thing, but it's short, so there's probably something good within it.
Okay, so you also mentioned morality.
Yeah.
Can we find objective morality without religion?
Well, yeah. I mean, so a non-religious person could still intuit that there are objective moral values. I mean, so I think an atheist of goodwill should be able to see that rape or murder, that oppression of people because of their race, et cetera, are all intrinsically wrong things to do.
But how do we intuit that? Because back in the Old Testament, when we didn't intuit that, God was like, that's okay, just obey me, that's the most important thing. But now, because somehow we believe these are wrong things to do, because that's the excuse. Like back then, they didn't believe they were wrong. Well, what made us believe they weren't wrong now? Because it's not like anybody, it's not like anything fundamentally different's happening in the world. It'd be one thing if we were all living in a way that was actually best and we weren't raping and murdering and doing all these things. But that's what's going on in the world right now. It has nothing to do with people are obeying God or not. A lot of people are doing that, and there is no actual sense of right and wrong. And then a lot of people who don't believe in God don't do those things because they see that it's not right. What does it have to do with God? What's his name? That famous drug dealer guy. You know, maybe it's just a movie I'm thinking of. But like the mafia people, like they believe in God. They go to church. Like, what does the God part have to do with the actual sense of morality? Because these people back in the Old Testament obeyed God, and they had no sense of murdering, killing, even raping. There's that stuff in the Bible too, that God either allows or commands. It's not like because they knew of God, they realized those things were wrong. And it's not like now, because we believe in a different form of God, we think it's wrong now. But ironically, we do think it's wrong now. So what they're going to do is say, oh, that's because we believe in God. That's because God is the source of that somehow. But it wasn't the source of it back then. And people aren't obeying God any more than they are back then. In fact, you don't really have to obey God because apparently Jesus came and died for your sins. So do you even really need to obey? So the whole thing is all over the place. But I'm going to let this guy finish.
They're all objectively wrong. Now, I would argue what a non-believer can't do is finally justify that. Because the question naturally arises, where do these objective moral values come from? They're a bit like the objective intelligibilities that the sciences depend upon, right? Every science goes out to meet some form of objective intelligibility in the world. So naturally a question arises, where's that come from? Why should the world be marked in every nook and cranny by intelligibility? So in a similar way, why are there these moral values and disvalues? Where do they come from? And I would argue the only way finally to ground that intuition is by talking about God, namely a moral lawgiver, you know. But to your question, sure, a non-believer.
So there's no other way that we could come to an understanding of why we shouldn't murder people. Oh no, you have that intuition, but you don't quite know why you don't want to murder. And really, at the end of the day, you can't justify why you wouldn't murder unless it's really coming from God. The same God that when people didn't have that intuitive sense was totally fine with them murdering and didn't push back. And you say, well, but he couldn't push back then because they wouldn't really understand. But he was punishing them for not killing enough when he told them kill. So it's like, oh, first of all, I just got to establish you got to obey me no matter what. I'm going to tell you to do a lot of stuff that in the future you're going to realize isn't good to do, but then you're going to realize it was because of me. Like, this isn't confusing at all, right? And on one of the I don't know, it wasn't the past live stream, but like 2 live streams ago, I think we talked about Thomas Jefferson. Maybe it was the first one. And him basically being like, no, the God of the Old Testament is clearly a very different conception of God, nothing like the one in the New Testament. But then the trick is that they somehow try to connect the two. And I think that makes it more problematic. Instead of us just talking about what would God actually be? Like, if we can use our intuition and our reason to get to things, why don't we use our intuition and our reason completely? And why do we need to read this book? Why does this book need to inform us something about it? Because then we also have to assume that the book is from God, which we can't verify, we cannot prove. That it's not possible to prove that because it was written by people. You would have to assume that they were inspired by God when they wrote it, but how would you verify that? And if somebody else says they were inspired by God, but you don't like what they said, you would say, no, you're lying that you're inspired. But what are you using? It's like, well, whatever I feel like it is, that's probably right, because my feelings probably tell me what God is, and it tells me what he wants, even though that would be the same reason you misused your free will in the first place, because you felt like you were over God or better than God or didn't need God. So the problem I see with all of this, not to go into a whole thing about objective morality right now, but the problem I see with it is you actually can't escape your own subjectivity. You can't claim that there has to be an ultimate moral objective point, because you still have to use your subjective awareness and your reasoning and your decision-making process to come to what is that objective thing. Because if it's simply, look, we all have an intuitive sense of what's right and wrong. And I'm just saying that it comes from God. Okay, fine, you can have it. But I also have an intuitive sense that we should do this. Oh, no, that's morally wrong. Even though intuitively you feel like it's right, it's wrong because God said it's not right. And it's like, well, then just tell us what's right or wrong. Why this argument about God being the source of it? If God's the source of it, then don't use your intuition at all, because your intuition would be irrelevant. Because how do I know when my intuition aligns with God and when it doesn't, unless I just go look at the book? But when I look at the book, there's two different versions of God depending on where the person was at. So I could say, well, where I'm at right now, intuitively, I feel like stealing is right. So I think God's okay with that because he was okay with it with those people. It's like, well, no, as a society, we've moved on. So like collectively, we all know murder and stealing is wrong. Do we? Look at the fucking world right now. There's this war going on with Iran. The Middle East is just like a tinderbox right now. I don't know. I mean, it's all over the place. They want to shut down the Strait of Hormuz. Trump's threatening that if they don't give up something or they don't agree to something by a certain deadline, they're going to bomb some of the resources in Iran. Iran says we're going to totally destroy all of the infrastructure in the Middle East and the other countries. He says if you do that, we're going to use weapons of mass destruction you've never seen before. And I mean, where is the God in all of this? It's nowhere. So I don't see how we're not still in that fallen world. Just because you want to make believe Jesus came and died and basically put us into a new phase of history where suddenly we're open to considering that things, could be better actually. And we don't have to just justify murder and war and things like that, because that was an old version. We weren't ready for that. But now we have the new version, but nobody whatsoever is following it. Not even the Christians, no one. And there's really not that much difference fundamentally between the God of Islam, the God of Judaism, the God of the Christians, especially the Christians who say that they accept the God of, think about that. You have a whole group of Christians that say God had a special covenant with the Jews, so they kind of have their own little thing. We don't need to interfere with that. He still fulfills that. So what does that imply? Does that imply they're still in that old state of mind where it's okay to kill and murder, and if God tells you to? So they have their own special deal with God. He can tell them it's okay to murder and kill. But if you're a Christian, if you weren't a Jew in the first place, if you're now part of this whole thing because you're Christian, now you are held by the idea of love and compassion and justice and all these things. And there's literally nothing you can do to stop any of the war, because how do you know if the people claiming to do it based on God aren't doing it based on the ideas of the God of the Old Testament? It's just totally fucking insane. And this whole argument, well, I don't need to belabor the point, because I think this idea that objective morality without religion isn't fundamentally possible because you have no way to ground it. It's like they just use this word, grounded. Here, let me help you out. Do you personally want to have an experience and a world and a reality that is best for you and best for everybody else? Even if you just say you want to be best for you. Ultimately, if you think of reality existentially, not just what you do in this life, but that reverberates whatever you accept and allow in this life, it's a statement of who you are, which reverberates into reality and will become your experience into eternity until you correct that. Considering that context, would you want to do what is best for all, or would you not? Doing what's best for all, meaning if you do things to abuse others where it's only beneficial to you, there's a time limit to how that will benefit you. It'll only benefit you temporarily, not into eternity, because you're literally abusing other parts of yourself because you are one and equal to all of reality. So you can't think in a limited sense of just yourself, because you're basically saying, I'm not reality. I'm this separate thing from reality that is totally separate and independent, and I can only think about things for myself. I think at some level, a Christian who's a Christian because like they really actually care about themselves and reality, I think they would agree with me in what I'm saying. But the problem is then we say, well, no, it's got to be God. It has to always go back to God. But I think God is a very limited concept because it still creates a point of separation that this thing that actually can act in the best interest of all can never be you. So it can't be you in the Old Testament because we were in a fallen state. But now that Jesus has redeemed everyone, it still can't be you. You can still never be perfect. So then what effect did this have? It doesn't change my behavior unless I choose to. And I would have to intuitively feel that being kind to people, for example, is actually what God wants. Because how do I know if the actual God of reality is the one that says, be kind? And if God came to you today, like in that example from Dean Withers and Nick Fuentes, and said, kill a baby right now. Actually, I think I played that part. Let me go back here real quick, because I don't know if we got to that when he says it again.
In the fallen world, people kill. In the fallen world, people kill, people lie, cheat, steal. Cain kills Abel. In the world, the fallen world, before Jesus Christ arrived, it was a world with slavery and warfare and iniquity.
How is that different now?
It is in this context that God commanded the chosen people to kill certain tribes to establish their survival, to secure a line for the coming of the Messiah.
Why would God have to do that? Why couldn't God just send the Messiah however he wants? Why does it have to secure a certain line? It's just like this crazy story that sounds really interesting and complex, but to actually believe that this is the way God would choose to do it is totally insane. If God was a real, actual, benevolent being that really cared and actually wanted to have a reality that was best for everybody.
God does not approve of killing because it says in the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill. God does not approve of rape because it says, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, and so on and so forth. So God obviously does not support killing, raping. Oh, would you kill and rape a baby? No. But in the Bible, God prescribes laws and specific actions at the beginning of the world, which was fallen without Christ, without a Savior, in sin, for the survival of the chosen people. So the rules worked a little bit differently in the Old Testament. It doesn't mean that, and of course, taking a life in and of itself, hang on, there's a difference everybody knows between killing and murder. If I go and murder you for no reason, that's immoral. If I kill in self-defense or self-defense of my children, it's a different story. God commanding the people of the Old Testament is an extraordinary exception based on the fallen old world. That's one. Two, when Jesus Christ arrives, he fulfills the law and saves people from hell. Before Jesus Christ arrived, nobody could even go to heaven, and it was a world of iniquity. And Jesus Christ changed and created this modern world that we're living in. So now here's the thing: God is the authority. If God commands us to, look, I know it's a complicated issue. You can't fit it into a TikTok where you do the Destiny drive-by and say, Trump's making your grocery prices higher. You know, but it's actually a complicated issue. We're talking about evil, the existence of evil. So does that mean that God is not an authority? Of course not. God is an authority. Would God command us to do those things today? Probably not. But if he did, in a hypothetical scenario, we'd have to trust God if we truly believe in God. Otherwise, you would say something like, we know more than God, or God is not good, or we're better than God, and that negates the concept of a God or good itself.
There you go. Look at that point right there. He still has within himself the possibility that God could command us to murder or kill. And who would you be to question God? Well, instead of saying like, no, absolutely God would not ask you to do that. That's not in God's nature. He's like, even if, yeah, God could do that, and if he did, you'd have to obey him. Doesn't that kind of contradict what the bishop was saying? this guy? Because then this is the question. And kind of what I was trying to say earlier. It's like, does your intuition of what's right and wrong really matter at all? Because if God commanded you to act in spite of that intuition, by definition, to do what is good, to do what is right, you would have to obey, because obeying God is the primary focus of morality, not actually the things you're doing and what are the consequences of those things. They don't care about the consequences. All they care is that I'm a special little boy and God accepts me and I'm going to heaven, and that's all that matters as long as God accepts me. And I don't want to disobey him, because if I disobey him, he's not going to accept me and I'm going to go to hell because I deserve hell because I'm so bad. You could literally just look at the consequences of what you participate in, what you accept and allow, and play it out and see, does it make sense? Now, it's hard to do that as an individual, because this concept of a fallen world, let's just take that for a moment. You live in a world where the systems that we have as human beings are not best for all. They're not best. So trying to consider doing something that is best when none of the systems support that, because for you to survive, like he said, God's chosen people have to survive. So if the basis of if the starting point of your existence is to survive, then you could really justify anything. There is no real principle in it, because I'm just trying to survive. I'm trying to survive now, and I'm trying to survive into eternity in the afterlife. That's the starting point of self-interest, which is ironic because the whole thing apparently was solved by Jesus not trying to survive, like sacrificing himself, saying like, I will give myself and my life for everybody else. But then the whole basis of everything is actually just survival, because that could be the only justification why God would command you to do killing, right? Is so that you could survive somehow. Because otherwise, why wouldn't he just say, no, don't kill, let yourself be killed, I guess. What can you do about it? It's difficult as an individual right now when you see the system is not actually working to your best benefit or anyone else's. That to make decisions that seem like they would be beneficial to everybody because the system doesn't support it. That's why the system has to change. That's why people now, right, and especially, it's why I'm calling this stream the Existential Crisis Hotline, because there's a lot of people out there right now going through an existential crisis. They don't know what their purpose is. People like Nick Fuentes believe they already know what their purpose is, to serve God. It's not real. Eventually, that point is going to collapse inside of him. I don't know if it'll happen before he dies. Maybe he'll live his whole life into old age and never give that point up. But when he dies, he'll have to face it, because you can't sustain a lie indefinitely. It eventually collapses, and you eventually have to face the reality that you're just looking for something outside of yourself that you perceive or that you claim to be the authority. So you don't really have to examine every aspect of yourself and determine, is who I am and the way I live reflective of considering what's best for all at all times? And again, that is a challenging thing to do, because our system is not designed to support that kind of decision-making process. That's why I always come back to the point of we have to change the system. Even if it feels like you can't quite at all times do what is best because you're put into these situations where you have to make a choice that you would rather not make, but you don't really have a choice. Yes, you have to go to work every day to put food on the table. That's not going to change even in a system that's best for all. We're going to have to create food for ourselves. But right now, you don't just create food for yourself and others. You go to work selling Nike shoes that other people covet because they want to feel a certain way inside. It's like all this irrelevant shit that sucks up all of our time just so we can get some money, just so we can go buy some food that fortunately someone grew. But how much more responsibility could we all take if we had the time to really educate ourselves and to support each other to understand these things of how to grow food properly? How to make clothing and be able to share things and share the abundance that you've created. But the world does not support that. It's ironic because The very world that Christians want to live in heaven, we could create that here on earth. But in order to do that, we have to change the system. And the reason I'm pushing so hard on the religion point, and I know I can get better at explaining it, so this is just kind of my attempts to do it in real time on a live stream. But this is standing in the way. Because you have to accept that ultimately morality is both objective and subjective. Because objective and subjective, there really is no actual separation. There actually is no separation between you on the inner and what you perceive on the outer. They're one and the same. You're just also having a subjective experience. But that subjective experience you can't live in that subjective world at the expense of not considering the objective world. So the objective morality that everyone is looking for is really just considering what's best for all. That's it. It's ultimately what Jesus was saying, I would suggest, when he said, love your neighbor as yourself, do unto another as you would have them do unto you. It's really basic, it's really obvious, but it's not lived. And the excuse we make is that, well, the system's fucked up because it's a punishment from us disobeying God. But the problem is, even in the belief that you can now obey God and accept God, you still don't create a world that's best for all. You're just waiting for it to happen later because you're using the excuse, oh, no, we can't because we're so broken. Well, are we fallen or are we not? If we're no longer fallen and we actually have the love and the grace of God, then let's fucking act like it. Instead, it's like, no, it's just still about believing in God. It's just totally insane. Do I want to go to this thing? Bishop Barron on who God is. Yeah, it's just kind of interesting. Why not? I find it interesting. I remember watching this a while back. Actually, it's 12 years old, man. But I watched it like maybe a year or two ago. And I like this one because, well, I'm going to let him explain and then I'll give comments. But I want you to listen really carefully to how he explains what he is saying God is. And he's getting this from a study of St. Thomas Aquinas, who was a scholastic in the like 15 or 1600s, I believe, something like that. I think 1500s. I mean, we can look it up, but it doesn't matter. You can look it up. And he used Aristotelian logic to kind of flesh out like what God really is. That's one of the things. He has this gigantic book called the Summa Theologia. So let's listen to what Bishop Barron says about who God is and who God isn't. I'll tell you what, it ain't you, that's who it isn't.
Just finished reading David Bentley Hart's great book called The Experience of God, Being, Consciousness, and Bliss.
Well, that tells it all, doesn't it? Being, consciousness, and bliss. Interesting.
Wonderful book at many levels, but I think the signal contribution is his clarification of what serious theists mean when they use the word God. There are a lot of conversations between theists and atheists today, and they both use the word God, but the trouble is, as Hart points out, there's just a massive equivocation. The same words being used, but in very different senses. It's not.
Wait, so a definition of words causes confusion about something? That's fascinating.
So much that Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins are seriously engaging Thomas Aquinas. It's rather that though they use the same word, namely God, they really have no idea what Aquinas means when he uses the word God.
By the way, I took an entire course on St. Thomas Aquinas when I was in university, because I went to a few different universities, but one of them was a private Catholic university, and we had to do a minor in theology as part of your degree, no matter what you were studying. And so we went really in depth with St. Thomas Aquinas.
Now, here's the thing. The new atheists, to a person, believe that God is some reality in the world, or alongside the world, or above the world. God is the supreme instance, if you want, of the category being. All kinds of beings around. God's the supreme instance of the category or genus of being.
I like how he says new atheists say that. No, that's what most people who believe in God believe God is. Okay? Now, that doesn't mean I'm saying his definition is bullshit. I'm just saying, like, the average person cannot fucking read St. Thomas Aquinas. Let me give you an example. Writings of St. Thomas Aquinas on God. Here we go. Is this Aquinas? Yeah, Summa Theologia. First part, question 2, the existence of God. Remember when we went through and we read... oh, I'm sorry. Katie's just telling me I wasn't playing the video. I'll come back to it. Thank you for letting me know. Yeah, I keep forgetting to switch it because I'm looking at this screen over here, and then the one that actually tells me what I'm showing is over here, so that's kind of my fault. All right, but I'll just have to remember that. So this is St. Thomas Aquinas. Maybe I'll just go back and play that again real quick for you guys. It was only the first couple minutes. Let me skip this BS.
Mean when they use the word God. You know, there are a lot of conversations between theists and atheists today, and they both use the word God, but the trouble is, as Hart points out, there's just a massive equivocation. The same words being used, but in very different senses. It's not so much that Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins are seriously engaging Thomas Aquinas. It's rather that though they use the same word, namely God, they really have no idea what Aquinas means when he uses the word God. Now, here's the thing. The new atheists, to a person, believe that God is some reality in the world, or alongside the world, or above the world. God is the supreme instance, if you want, of the category being. All kinds of beings around. God's the supreme,
like the ultimate, supreme being.
Instance of the category or genus of being. Well, that's exactly what God is not.
Okay, so God is not the supreme being, guys. Like, just use your own moral intuition here. Talk to the average person who believes in God and ask them, is God a being that exists? Is God the supreme being? Does God act in the world? Like, all the things he said, the new atheists are trying to act like they're attacking this bullshit version of God. Nobody believes. I mean, I know he's not saying nobody believes it, but he's kind of like pinning it on the new atheists. And I think the atheists, their problem isn't with maybe what he's about to say. Their problem is with all the people who believe in this supreme being. It's kind of like the point I'm making. So if this guy's going to say, oh, no, Cameron, all that stuff you're saying about God, that's not the issue. The issue is that God is not any of that stuff you're saying. Well, okay, but there's a lot of people who are living their lives as if that's what God is. Like, we just watched that clip from Nick Fuentes. He's talking about God like God is a being. He's not talking about what he's about to say. Okay, so let me keep it going.
According to Thomas Aquinas. Thomas couldn't be clearer. He says that God is not in any genus. Even that most generic of genera, namely being. You say, well, isn't God at least a type of being? And Thomas's beguiling answer is, no, he's not. God's not a thing or an individual. Rather, God is, in Thomas's pithy Latin, ipsum esse subsistens, which means the subsistent act of to be itself. God is not an item within the world. See, all the new atheists believe that, some version of it. I call it, of course, the Yeti theory of God. Some people say there is a Yeti, Bigfoot. Some say there isn't. Let's go find out. Some believe it, some don't. That's precisely what God is not, some item within nature, within the world. Rather, God is that great ocean of existence from which the world in its entirety comes. Not something in the world, but the condition for the possibility of the world. That's God.
Cool. That sounds awesome. What the fuck does that have to do with you and the choices you make? And in the Garden of Eden, if you want to take that story in any way literally, how did God, this ocean of existence from which we arise, command them to not eat the fruit? And how did they disobey him? And how did they then therefore believe they were above God. Like this idea, is that what atheists think that they're above? Is the ocean of existence from which all things arise? I don't think so. When someone says, oh, you're an atheist because you want to be God, you don't want to accept God's authority, the authority of reality itself, of which I am a part of and am also that. If I'm a part of reality, then that means reality is me also. So wouldn't my authority within myself come from the fact that I am reality? Unless you believe, no, you're just this little separate thing that's not real at all. You have no authority whatsoever. God has authority. Then why the fuck does it matter what I do? What does it matter whether I obey? How can I even have free choice in that context? So it sounds really nice. It sounds profound. But to me, it's just St. Thomas Aquinas being a little weird monk in his bedroom by himself, getting off on the idea of like imagining this crazy, like it's like an acid trip sort of thing. Let's just see what he says. Whether the existence of God is self-evident. Now, this is obviously a translation because I believe he wrote in Latin, if I'm not mistaken. So it's translated, but still. It seems that the existence of God is self-evident. Now, those things are said to be self-evident to us, the knowledge of which is naturally implanted in us, as we can see in regard to first principles. But as St. Damascene says, the knowledge of God is naturally implanted in all. Therefore, the existence of God is self-evident. Well, how do you explain atheists then? See, that made sense back in the day when like everyone already believed in God, I suppose. So it was like self-evident to everybody. But it's like the idea, oh, you know what it is? It's like the idea that because you can come up with the concept, it must exist. Like, how can it be that we could think of it? Well, I could tell you how we could think of it. We could just be self-interested. And we would come up with this idea that there's something else that takes responsibility for us. It's called self-deception. It's not that hard. Sandra says, he says, if you try to quote Aquinas to contradict Catholics, they'll say Aquinas is not doctrine, so I don't know why he's using Aquinas to... Exactly. But see, that's the problem. The no true Scotsman fallacy, really. Which I don't know if everyone has heard of that or not, but it's like, it's kind of like a joke, but it's a fallacy. It's like the true Scotsman. It's like my grandfather is a Scotsman, and I'm probably butchering the whole thing, but it's my version of it. My grandfather's a Scotsman, and he gets up every day at 3 a.m. Someone says, well, that's not a true Scotsman. True Scotsmen get up at 2 a.m. And it's like, no matter what you say, that's not a true Scotsman. The true Scotsmen do this, but everyone has their own version of it. So no one ever can be a true Scotsman. Again, it's probably like a much better description of that fallacy. True Scotsman fallacy. When someone attempts to protect a universal generalization from counterexamples by redefining the group to exclude the exception, right? Shifting the goalposts. Person A, no Scotsman puts sugar on his porridge. But my Uncle Angus is a Scotsman and he loves sugar on his porridge. Ah, yes, but no true Scotsman puts sugar on his porridge. So you could just do that ad infinitum. No true Christian would act this way, used to dismiss the actions of someone who identifies as Christian but acts differently than expected. So it's like a Christian could say, oh, but this guy's not even, Aquinas, that's not doctrine, so that's not like technically like the actual thing. And I'm like, well, why is this bishop fucking quoting it then? Why is he sitting here going on about like, guys, God is not this thing you think it is. It's way beyond that. You want to know why, actually? Just realized. I'm glad Sandra pointed that point out. Because they want everybody to believe that God is a being out there. It's a manipulation. That's all it is. If you want someone to give up their power to you, it's very useful for you if they believe that there's a supreme being out there. So, of course, they don't want people with a high education, high vocabulary level, ability to read Thomas Aquinas and to like think about it and be like, oh shit. Okay, so God is just that which allows everything to exist. It's just the beingness within everything. That is God. Like, it's just that. And I'm like, okay, why do you have to call it God? Couldn't you call it something like life? Like, I'm alive because life is within me. And I can abuse that ability to live and exist, or I can cherish it, take it very seriously, take responsibility for it, and I can recognize that in others, and I can see the equality there, and I can say, how could I support them as life as well? And I could see all things that way. But that requires a lot more responsibility. And if everybody thought that way, it'd be a lot harder to manipulate people, because you would be able to spot abuse very quickly. You would see, like, hold on, why is this life abusing that life? The only way that that could happen is if this life over here doesn't perceive itself as life, perceives itself as a separate individual consciousness that must protect its own existence, as if it's separate somehow. And then within that, you're like, well, since I'm just this individualized consciousness that isn't life itself, there must be something else out there that protects me and protects existence and holds it all together, because it sure as shit ain't me. But that's self-dishonest, actually. All right.
You know, one way to get at this, too, is to distinguish between God, capital G, and the gods. Go back to the old, Greek and Roman myths, or myths of any culture, really. Gods. The gods are supreme instances of, let's say, the human type.
Well, they're definitely not supreme, fundamentally, eternally, actually, like, all the way. They're just, like, glorified humans. There's a great book that Katie suggested me to read called Ilium by Dan Simmons, which does a great job of, like, showing, like, the gods as, like, superior to humans, but they're still, like, not really actually superior. It's I don't want to spoil it. It's really good. If you've ever read Hyperion by Dan Simmons, that series, you'd really like Ilium. Might actually in some ways be better.
So look at the great Greek and Roman gods. They're like superhumans, who they are immortal, and they have, super minds and super skills and powers. But they are finally beings in the world, living up on Mount Olympus or down in the sea or up in the sky or something. They're supreme instances of the human or the natural. They're not, strictly speaking, supernatural. They exist as denizens within nature. This is why.
Does he think that atheists believe that God, like, exists in nature? I mean, I guess I can see what he's saying. Like, that is what people think at some level. They can't. The problem with it is you have to literally believe there's a reality beyond reality, which isn't possible. So if it doesn't exist in reality, that means it's separate from reality, which means you would have to then assume our reality is sort of like an illusion, basically, which it is not. It is real. Just because we're not taking responsibility and being good stewards of it doesn't make it any less real. That's the problem, is we're not doing that. But again, all this leads to is a very abstract idea that God is so beyond any kind of reality we could possibly perceive. That would therefore imply that the reality we can perceive is really just like nothing.
We can say legitimately that the sciences, the modern sciences, have indeed eliminated the gods. So with our scientific equipment and our great scientific spirit, we've explored the heavens, and we've explored mountaintops and the depths of the ocean, and indeed we haven't found supreme beings around. More to it, the modern physical sciences have managed to explain most physical phenomena. We don't have to appeal to...
All right, anyways. This guy's, like, rambling now. Yeah, so there's some St. Thomas for you. Let's see what else. Whether God exists. It seems that God does not exist. This is the objection. Because if one of two contraries can be infinite, the other would be altogether destroyed. But the word God means that he is infinite goodness. If therefore God existed, there would be no evil discoverable. But there is evil in this world, therefore God does not exist. Okay, so that's the objection, right? The second objection is, further, it is superfluous to suppose that what can be accounted for by a few principles has been produced by many. But it seems that everything we see in the world can be accounted for by other principles, supposing God did not exist. For all natural things can be reduced to one principle, which is nature. See, that's the problem, though. Well, I'm going to skip that for now. And all voluntary things can be reduced to one principle, which is human reason or will. Therefore, there is no need to suppose God's existence. On the contrary, it is said in the person of God, I am who am. I answer that the existence of God can be proved in 5 ways. Okay, so the argument, things are in motion, therefore you need a first mover. Okay, but why can't it be yourself? Why can't you be that thing? Okay, because again, you assume that the form you're in is who you are fundamentally, and the consciousness you have is who you are. You're not seeing that it's life itself. The second way is from the nature of the efficient cause. So he's just doing like basically an Aristotelian proof here. That's it. I mean, it's like not even that good of an argument. Okay, well, anyways, you can read more about St. Thomas Aquinas if you want. I mean, I'm just disappointed because it's just a bunch of Aristotelian logic. Where does he answer this? Efficient cause. See, the problem is you have to understand the difference, what efficient cause is, right? Because there's different causes in Aristotelian logic. The third way is taken from the possibility and necessity. The fourth way is taken from the gradation to be found in things. Some are less good, less true, etc. The fifth way is taken from the governance of the world. We see things that lack intelligence, such as natural bodies. But they don't lack intelligence, actually. Therefore, some intelligent being exists by whom all natural things are directed to their end. But the intelligence that things are directed towards their end, you see, you're just calling that God. But you're saying that that intelligence must be a thing in itself rather than it's just the inherent built-in intelligence of everything. So it's like, where is the actual argument that I don't know, what's this? Sandra saying, hey, what the fuck was the Baron talking about? They literally say the triune God is 3 beings in one. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Was that something he was talking about? Oh, yeah, I see your point. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, see, and that's the problem. You can listen to this bishop and be like, man, that's so profound. Okay, that's what God is. But then, like Sandra's pointing out in the chat, they say that there's a triune God. It's 3. Well, they say it's 3 persons. I don't know what this guy's talking about. I can't read that language. But if you switch over there to this mode, okay, let me just do a Google search and let's just see what comes up. Is God a being? Wow. Okay. Let me try that again. Is God a being? Like I said, I have my keyboard in a weird place, so it's like, it depends. God is a being, personal approach, personal agent. Many interpret God as a personal being who, rather than a what, supreme being, often defined as supreme self-existent and necessary being who is the cause of all other things. Many biblical writers describe God as a character, a king, a judge, a father who engages directly with humanity, suggesting a personal being. God is a being in itself, classical philosophical approach, not a creature. St. Thomas Aquinas and other theologians argue that God is not a being, but being itself. I mean, cool, okay, it's being itself. But I'm also a being. Am I being itself? Am I an expression of that being? I guess it depends on how you look at it. What do I define myself as? Do I define myself as purely the expression of the being itself? Or do I define myself as being itself in this expression? And therefore, what different responsibility would I take as this expression if I saw that I was being itself, expressing itself? So because the whole thing is muddied up with God is also a supreme being, no one would ever consider it like what I just said. I am. This perspective draws from Exodus, where God identifies, I am who I am, just like Thomas Aquinas was doing, interpreted as the ultimate source of reality, not a specific finite energy. I would argue that the I am is not the source of reality, though. I would argue that it is a reflection of reality onto itself. Viewing God as a being can be seen as limiting or anthropomorphic, reducing God to an object within the universe rather than the creator upon whom all depends. But how do we depend on him other than just we exist? So I would say this concept I'm bringing forth, which is also in the Destiny material of life itself, is a much more effective term because there's no hierarchy in it. And it implies absolute self-responsibility. What is this person saying? Is this just like a kind of troll or something? Or are they just... I don't know what they're saying. Let's see. I'll try to translate it. Oops, hold on. My chat. There we go. I'm curious what this person is saying. Translation. Hold on. Translate. Detect language. The man we call Paul never saw Jesus once in his entire life. That's apparently one thing he's saying. Yep, I'm aware of that. Oops, I did not mean to pin that comment. And let's see what he says here. He literally didn't see Jesus. He just heard a voice. He says, I accept only Matthew and Luke. The others are not even apostles. Okay. I mean, that's one opinion, I suppose. Like, that's fine. You can accept whatever you want to accept. But I don't see the value in accepting that. Okay. Let me go back to... Actually, I want to hear a little bit of this real quick. I remember watching this. I think this is where I first heard this guy.
That's an act of to be itself. God is ipsum esse subsistens. God is the subsistent act of to be itself. Another way to state that in Aquinas is God is that reality, unique, absolutely unique, in which essence and existence coincide. To be God is to be to be. Those are all ways of talking about what we mean by God. They are kind of gnomic, and that's on purpose. There's almost a Zen koan kind of quality about the way we talk about God. I'm saying something that's substantive, but it's more in like a via negativa mode.
I like it because you can't tie that down. If you're like, well, God is to be, it is just the to be of to be. Okay, but also he wrote a book, inspired men to write a book about him. How does this version of God not contradict the version of God in Islam or Judaism or any other religion? It really doesn't. It's just, again, okay, fine. God is just that which is the ground of all being. What does that have to do with Jesus? It's like, well, but then God incarnated as a being on earth, but then also prayed to himself, and he gave an example, and it's like, you could just look at what Jesus said and evaluate for yourself. Does it make sense what Jesus said? Do you need all the God stuff? Is it really necessary? Could you say, look, I don't know if there's this thing called God, but whatever it is, I'm ultimately fully self-responsible for what I accept and allow in this world. So it doesn't really matter if there's a God or not, because if God is just the to be of to be, that doesn't really tell me how to live. But then in all of the ways in which God tells us how to live, you have to sort of think of him like he's a being. So that's why it's like they want to have their cake and eat it too kind of a thing. I'm not going to play more of that. I do want to spend a little bit of time with this because this was super fascinating. This was kind of like this along with that Nick Fuentes is kind of what inspired me to want to talk about this tonight. Let me see. I think I have it kind of skipped forward. So basically, Jordan Peterson went on Jubilee, and originally it was supposed to be 20 atheists debating a Christian, but then they sort of apparently at the last minute switched it to Jordan Peterson. So he does a lot of equivocating, and he doesn't really represent himself as a pure Christian, so to speak. And I think it's a very tricky thing they did. So you get a lot of really weird back and forth here. Yeah. Katie's like, how is he a he? Sandra says, God is understood in the Catholic Catechism as the supreme being, creator, and principal object of faith, revealed as the Trinity of persons, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. This doctrine emphasizes that while God is one, each person of the Trinity is fully and entirely God. Yeah, exactly. I know. But the thing is, I went to a Catholic school, and we also studied Thomas Aquinas. So I feel like there's almost two different levels. There's like the normies who can't read Thomas Aquinas, and they're like, for you, God is like a being, and he gives all these commandments, and they have a lot to do with going to church and giving money to the church, but forget about that. Oh, and also coming to confession and telling us all your deepest, darkest secrets, all the weird, naughty shit that you do in the bedroom, and that, you know, you thought about your husband or your wife, and that, you know, Sally did down the road, and, you know, the secret thoughts you're having about your neighbor and all that. Come tell us all of that. Trust me, we won't tell a soul. So I was thinking of it like, the Catholic Church has a spy network. Like they have an AI surveillance system called confession booths, where literally everybody in the church goes and tells them all their deep, dark, nasty shit, like naughty things, everything. And like I was imagining going to church and like all the men and women there who've told the priest all their stuff, and they know it's the priest because they can hear the guy's voice. They know who he is. And they're all standing around talking to each other, pretending to be holy and everything. And he's like, I know all the shit you all do. There's one of the books, Terry Pratchett book. It's one of the first 2 or 3 books, I think. And they do this whole thing with like confession. And it's like not quite Catholicism, but it's a really funny twist on that. But I don't remember what the book is called. Yeah, and like Katie said, well, how is he a he, or how does he speak? Again, it's having your cake, eating your cake too. You want to have both. Because it's easy to control people when they believe God's a supreme being and he's going to give you a spanking if you don't obey. But for all the other people who are too smart for that, they're like, look, that's not what it is. God is just the ground of all being. Like, do you want to run this world or not? Okay? And I mean, look at the Old Testament. There is no morality. It's whatever you intuitively think is right or wrong. And why would God put that in your heart if it was wrong? And you could go to any part of the Bible and justify anything you want to justify. All right, I'm talking a lot. Let me just play some of this because it's really fascinating. I might skip around because some of them are not that interesting to me, but let me see. I'll start with this one.
Good afternoon, Dr. Peterson.
How you doing?
So this claim here that atheists don't know what they're rejecting.
Oh, yeah. I didn't show what the claim was. The claim was atheists reject God, but they don't understand what they're rejecting. I think it says it right here. Atheists reject God, but they don't understand what they're rejecting, or they don't know what they're rejecting, something like that. Oh, it's right there.
My background is in studying to become a traditional Catholic priest, daily mass, daily rosary, going on long retreats, deep into the magisterium and biblical hermeneutics. Like I was thoroughly in it. And it seems like I do know what I'm missing. Is there something that I missed over years of study, both this issue formally and living out religion so deeply?
Well, you obviously feel that you missed something when you were practicing for the priesthood. Your aim was off then. So
And
there's
so-
always the possibility that it's still off now.
What was off about my aim in the first place?
I don't know. That might take a long time to figure out. But
Then it seems kind of like this no true Scotsman type of fallacy in which you're the arbiter of people's aims and how they understand those aims to be. How is it that you can claim that people don't know something that you know about their life despite not having met them?
well, it's obviously a generic claim, just like the atheist claim that there's no God is a generic claim. In your case, it would have to be specified more, and I'm not claiming to understand what was going on in your mind, but my experience with atheists is twofold, is that they have a very reductive notion of what constitutes God, let's say in the Judeo-Christian tradition, and they've often been hurt by someone who was religious or by the religious enterprise or perhaps by God himself, so to speak, and that's left them with an animus.
But I think that you have a reductive view of what atheism is.
I just want to address that point right there. I don't have a reductive view of what God is. I mean, I'm also not an atheist, so maybe it doesn't apply to me, but I don't have a reductive view. Like, I understand all the different arguments. I understand the St. Thomas Aquinas argument. I understand that point, but I can also see we can go beyond that. And in going beyond that, that's not me saying I want to usurp God. It's me realizing God's not going to take responsibility for reality. If you look at the definition that we were looking at with that bishop, how does that God that is just the to be of to be take responsibility for everything? It's more like it just allows things to exist. I don't see why I have to assume I'm separate from that. That doesn't make me God. And even if you said that, people say, oh, you think you're God. Well, hold on. God isn't a supreme being lording over everyone then, right? It's just that which is the existence of everything. I'm not claiming I personally, in this form, am that thing. But how am I separate from existence? How am I separate from that which exists and is the existence of existence? How am I separate from that? And only in seeing myself as separate from that would I then not take full self-responsibility for the form that I'm in. And even in saying that, I can see the Christian mind going like, oh, you just think you're the one, you're the great one. No, I'm saying everyone is that. By definition, if I'm saying I'm that, it implies everyone and everything is that. So there is no room for anyone to be the one that's in control and in power. But it would be ironic if someone argued that if we're saying God is the to be of to be, the ipse sum esse or whatever the hell he said. And then if I said, well, I'm that, then they would say, oh, you think you're God, the mighty, most powerful, supreme being of all real? Well, hold on. I thought you said God wasn't that. I thought you said God wasn't that. And so I think it's also a paradox because people say like, well, God is not a being that exists, so you can't be God because you're a being that exists. I'm like, you're defining it that way. Just because St. Thomas Aquinas couldn't wrap his fucking retarded monk mind around what I'm saying right now doesn't mean that he had the answer. He was wrestling with the point. He was trying to use Aristotelian logic to try to understand this thing that he couldn't understand that actually doesn't make sense. And he was doing the best that he could, let's say. But then, like Sandra was pointing out, Catholics completely reject that as their official doctrine. So do you believe that God is that which is in everything and is the existence of everything? Or do you believe it's a supreme being that takes responsibility for everything? Because if so, that's a problem. Katie says it's not going to show it. The Bible is a mechanism to separate each human being from God. It's the interpretation needed because they can't understand God. Yeah. And it's not the only one. There's lots of these books. So go figure that one out. Okay, let me continue.
Defined religion so broadly to include any sort of having aim in life, any sort of cultural archetypes, or having a metaphorical substrate. And atheism to you is a very specific type of like 3 people in the world that are these Raskolnikov type of, they want to get away with a perfect murder. It seems like you have the reductive view of what an atheist is.
Well, let's start with your claim.
Mm-hmm.
How do you define the God that you're rejecting? Like, what is God to you? You studied in the church, you found that unsatisfactory.
See, that's an unfair thing for him to do. Because has Peterson clearly defined what God is? Because he's basically saying, you reject God, but you don't understand what you're rejecting. Well, give me any definition of God then. It's like, so I have to now pick a specific God that I'm rejecting. But there is no specific definition. I just looked it up on Google. It could be this, it could be that, it could be a lot of different things. And if I attack this one, then you'll say it's this one. But if I attack this one, you'll say it's this one. Or you'll say it's something else. So again, I'm not trying to defend atheists because there's a lot more to these discussions and everything. But again, right away, it's like, how do you even answer that question? It's like, you define the God that you're rejecting, and then I'll tell you why that's not real. It's like, well, no. I think to the guy's credit, he's like, you're reducing atheists to some specific thing. So it's Peterson making the claim that atheists are rejecting something they don't understand.
How would you characterize what you rejected?
I think the average Christian believer, when they say that they're Christian and they believe, they mean some sort of God that is all...
Okay, just again, remember, originally this debate was supposed to be a Christian versus 20 atheists. At the last minute, they switched it to Jordan Peterson. And that's why originally the title of this video was a Christian versus 20 atheists. And then they changed the title of it after people were like, what? This is Jordan Peterson. You didn't give like a Christian. Because these people came prepared to debate a Christian about the Christian God. And what he will do is kind of make it like this wishy-washy, well, it could be all these other things too, right?
Powerful, all perfect, is somehow involved in the matters of this world, and that we look to them through wisdom and with the Logos incarnate in Christ. And it also seems like you don't believe in religion in the way that the average Christian says that they believe in religion. And there are as many gods out there as there are believers, because everybody has mutually exclusive and different views of what God is. So it seems
well,
like...
if everybody had mutually exclusive views of what God is, no one could speak to each other. The mere fact of communication presumes a commonality of assumption and definition. And it's certainly not the case that I regard any archetypal manifestation whatsoever as equally religious. So that's not a real claim. Let me give you an example. For example, there's a sub-narrative in the story of Moses where Moses is rewarded with a glimpse of God.
Oh God, don't get us started on Moses. I mean,
And
did you say Moses or Job? He said Moses, sorry. I was thinking he said Job.
One of the ways that God is characterized in the Old Testament stories.
Yes.
Now, Moses is a faithful servant of God and a good man. At least that's the case within the confines of the story.
One possible interpretation.
It's the case within the confines of the story, obviously.
Well, not obviously. When we look at the Bible can't precisely say anything because there are so many different exegetical and hermeneutic views of this particular book. And
yeah, like Jordan Peterson's like, no, he's a good man if you read the story. In the context of the story, he's a good man. It's like, yeah, that's one interpretation of it, like, I suppose. But that's not the only interpretation everyone has. Not even between Christians.
And that everybody has everybody has disagreed historically on, it seems like, even the most benign detail about a book this big. And it seems like you can only say that the Bible says something if you first presuppose that it's univocal.
So your claim essentially is that Moses in the Old Testament plays the role of a villain or is irrelevant? Because the alternative claim is...
Well, I mean, it depends on which side of the story you're on, isn't it? Like, if you wrote... Like, imagine you could write a story from the perspective of a villain, but you could write it in a way where you're empathizing with the villain. And I think actually, I don't even have to make up a story. Just look at the story of Moses. God murdered the firstborn children of the Pharaoh, of Egypt. He murdered all of them. He sent the angel of death. Moses was an agent of God in that story. How is that not a villainous act? It's like, well, but God is good and Moses is good. So, like, well, but you're assuming those things in the first place. You could tell the whole story from a different perspective, from the perspective of just a random Egyptian family just going about their day, baking bread. And the Pharaoh's kind of an asshole, and you got these Jews over here, and like they are kind of like slaves, I guess, but your life's not that great either. You're just like a random, normal, like, you know, lower class Egyptian person. And then at a certain point, they do all these plagues to like get the Pharaoh to, you know, let the people go, as they say. And then there's even a point where the Pharaoh's going to consider letting them go. God hardens his heart and makes him change his mind to not let them go so that he can send the angel of death and kill all the firstborn, except for the firstborn of the people who put the, you know, the blood over their door or whatever. And like just flat out murders all these people. Why did he just let him go? It's like, well, I mean, there's so many interpretations, right, of why that would have been the case. But he just wanted to prove that of his glory and prove it to the people he chose. Why didn't he just choose everybody in the world? It's not like these people that he chose were particularly obedient to God. So I'm just saying, like, to sit here and already say, like, no, they're the good guys because that's what it says in the Bible. It's like, well, that's just your interpretation of it because you're siding with that side because you're already assuming they're the good guys.
That we can't.
And if you said, no, I think they're the bad guys, you'd be like, that's preposterous.
No, because we can't talk to those authors.
If you are going to start with the presupposition that there's nothing I can say about any of these stories that you're not going to disagree with from the perspective that there are multiple potential competing claims, then I can't speak with you. So
But that is the problem. Which specific perspective are you choosing right now, and why are you choosing that particular specific perspective? And then you're saying an atheist is rejecting all of this and they don't understand it. When he's like, look, there's all these different interpretations. It's like, well, if you're just going to say that, then I can't even have a conversation with you. It's like, but you're the one saying that someone else is rejecting the thing and don't understand it, but then wanting to choose a very specific, narrow view of a thing that serves the purpose of your argument. But it seems like this guy does understand a lot about it.
I also have a short time here, so I want to get to the core of what you're arguing here, and I'd love if we could.
The core of what I'm arguing is that atheists reject God, but they don't understand what they're rejecting. So I'm trying to give you an example of what's being rejected and its complexity. Okay, so God rewards Moses with a glimpse of the divine. So this is a definition of the God that atheists are hypothetically rejecting.
A possible one.
I said "a."
Yeah.
I didn't say "the." I
know.
said "a."
That is possible, yes.
Okay. So despite the fact that Moses is a stellar character and he's had a long and difficult life and can withstand a lot of difficulty and travail, God put...
See, what's interesting too is I mean, I don't think we'll have time to watch all of this, but so I'll kind of give my perspective of having seen this before on some of these things. But if you look at what Jordan Peterson's arguing, and he does this throughout, it's like he's taking sort of a humanistic lesson out of the Bible. Like Moses was this man who was a good man, and it was about him going through tough things and not giving up on his purpose. And it's like, well, that's a cool lesson, but that doesn't imply that the God character is real and that it's in control of reality. Like it's just a character in the story from that perspective. It's like I can read, take any fucking science fiction book. Like I can read Asimov, and I can read about what's the guy's name? I don't even remember the main character's name right now. Elijah Bailey, who's like a detective, and he has to go through all these periods where he like has no clue how to solve the case, and then he just keeps going, and he kind of like just blundering his way through it and putting the pieces together, and he doesn't give up, and he finally will get to the point where he's able to make a conclusion, and he solves the problem, solves the case. But that doesn't mean I have to believe humanoid robots that are exactly like replicas of human beings and have positronic brains are real things to appreciate the lesson of the story. It's just a story that has a lesson in it. So this is also the issue, is like the way Jordan Peterson argues is as if, no, we're looking at this from a not even just metaphorical, like an archetypal story narrative lesson-based sort of thing. But that's not what Christians believe. They actually believe God is a real being that has power in reality that they must pray to and submit to and obey. And that justifies some things that they do. They're not just saying it's like a lesson about perseverance through difficulty.
Puts him between two cliffs, so he can just see a crack of what's in front of him. And when God walks by, he allows him to see his back. Okay, so the implication of that story is that the divine is fundamentally unknowable. It's a pinnacle experience, and that people in their finitude have to be shielded from a comprehensive vision of the basis of reality.
Okay, so how the fuck is this concept in any way useful to us as human beings whatsoever? So all that stuff he said was really cool and really profound. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You have this like pinnacle experience, this self-actualization experience where you're just like so orgasmic and blissful because you've reached the height of your consciousness and you're just at your peak and you're focused and you're flowing and you're just feeling so amazing. Okay, I'm sure lots of people have had that throughout history, and they were fucking sociopaths, and they did shit that caused a lot of problems. What does that have to do with a reality that we participate in where we actually consider the consequences of our actions? Why do you need to have a divine pinnacle experience of the ultimate unknowable divine base of reality in order to just consider what would be the best thing for us to do in the context of us being human beings, animals, plants, the laws that we can understand through our scientific processes and so forth, and our observations and our testing of things, also using common sense, also considering I wouldn't want to have a certain experience if I was in someone else's shoes, so I shouldn't participate in things that would cause them to have that just so that I can have an experience within myself that doesn't really benefit anybody else. How many people could justify doing a lot of shit just to have that pinnacle experience? It really shows you like the root of all of this is just a self-interest. It's a focus on yourself as having some heightened experience.
Well, that's not the God that's defined in that manner, right? It's not a simple personification. It's not a simple old man in the sky. It's something that in its essence is unknowable and overwhelming. And that isn't, in my experience, the God that's defined by atheists who are attempting to undermine the story. I mean, it's the same.
Okay, see, he's doing the same thing the bishop did. He's like, the atheist, you have this superficial idea of God. He's like a man in the sky, and that's why you hate God, because you don't like your dad or some shit like that. And it's like, and I'm trying to make it clear, like, I don't think that's all that the concept of God could mean. It could mean base reality, the fundamental unknowableness of all reality. Yes, because you're in an individualized form. So I can't at all times have a divine experience of all oneness of all reality at all times. It would blow my fucking mind and my circuits, and I wouldn't be able to function. Okay, who cares? As an individual, why should I even try to seek that experience? That's why people do drugs. That's why they meditate. That's why they do transcendental meditation. That's why they dance for hours and hours to put themselves in a trance, to have a divine experience. That's why the saints, if you read The Varieties of Religious Experience by William James, I think, and he describes, like, I remember reading this when I was like 20 something years old, and he describes all these saints and like the shit they would put themselves through. Like, this guy would wear this shirt that was made of like coarse hair, and it would be turned inward on his skin, and it would be itchy. And he would just always constantly be itchy and uncomfortable until he would no longer have any attachment to the sensations of his body, because he felt within that he would like transcend his identity somehow and be unioned with God and have a mystical, ecstatic experience of union with God. Mother Teresa believed that you could have that experience of union with God through pain and suffering. And it's like detaching yourself. I mean, Buddha was basically saying the same shit. So what value is that to anybody? Like, right now, there are missiles flying back and forth across the Middle East, and there are, I'm sure, women, children, and men, not to rule them out, not to, you know, we always act like women and children, like, what about the men? Like, there's just like normal men walking around getting blown up, dying. Right now, they're threatening each other that they're going to blow up water desalination plants on either side. That means people are going to go without fucking water. And like, we live here in a rural area, and when the water doesn't work, it's difficult. Like, you can't feed your animals, you can't give them water, you can't have water, you can't take baths. It's a problem, right? And it's like, I'm not in Iran where they're threatening to blow up the water desalination plants, but they're building all these fucking data centers everywhere, which is going to fuck with the water supply. It's going to fuck with the electricity. It's also not fun when you don't have electricity. Right now, Cuba is in like a total blackout. I don't know if they've recovered from it or not, but they keep going into these complete, total 100% blackouts on the entire island. That's not okay. And on both sides, everybody thinks they're doing the will of God.
Claim, for example, that you're a finite creature and that you face something that in the final analysis is unknowable, and that you have to establish a relationship with it regardless of your inability to perceive or even withstand.
He said it right there. You have to establish a relationship with it. That equals separation. Why don't you just accept the consequence of not taking responsibility as God from the very beginning? The consequence of that was that you've now created a bunch of differentiated, individualized forms, and you're now in one of those forms. And you can't go back. What everyone's trying to do is go back. They're trying to get back to the union with God. They're trying to get back to that supreme, sublime, divine experience. Go listen to people talking about the energy and the spirituality and the quantum, this and that. Like, they just want to have a fucking experience. When a woman or a man divorces their spouse, it's because they're just not getting the energy out of the relationship anymore. Yeah, you say, well, they were abusive and stuff. Yeah, but that was a buildup of energy in their mind, thoughts, feelings, emotions, not expressing it, not directing it in a way that was best for all, being spiteful in their minds and their thoughts towards each other. And eventually, the positive, fun energy that you felt in the beginning is no longer there. That's how you get to that point. It's got nothing to fucking do with the divine, sublime experience. It's just you are a being, and you're not being honest within yourself. You're allowing yourself to follow a program. And that's all this is.
Perceiving the whole. Okay, is there a problem with that?
I mean, the problem is that when we look at, famously, when you've been asked, do you believe in God, the question becomes...
They're going to cut this guy off soon, so I'm going to move on. I don't remember if this one was worth listening to. Let's just see. I can't remember what he was talking about.
Deity Lono.
So you're rejecting something without...
Okay, I don't want to hear that guy. Let's see. This guy was kind of interesting, but there was one very specifically I really liked. I might come back. I think this guy was kind of interesting. Let me come back here, because he kind of knew what he was talking about.
would somehow turn it into a belief.
To Job and to Christ. Now you earth.
Decided.
Oh, wait, address that first.
Really trying to understand your.
Damn, I'm trying to get. Okay, here we go.
Dr. Peterson?
Good to see you, man.
Pleasure.
What's your name?
Brian. So the first thing I would like to say is I would like to engage in this discussion in a symbiotic manner. I would not like to engage where there is one clear winner and one clear loser. Emotions are activated and it ultimately comes about ego. So I'm just saying I'm really trying to understand your position, and I would just like you to really try to understand my position.
Oh, the claim here, they move on to another claim. Morality and purpose cannot be found within science, which I agree with, but let's see what they say.
Deal.
Okay, sounds good. With that, if you're saying that morality and purpose cannot come from science, is the opposite of that true, that morality and purpose can only come from God?
That's a way of defining it, yes.
Okay.
That's right, that's good. So I would say that with regard to the first claim, say, atheists don't understand what they're rejecting, because I would say by definition, God is the unity upon which moral claims are based. That's a definition, right?
Okay, if there is...
See, but the problem with that is, okay, God is the unity upon which moral claims are based. But nobody really fundamentally agrees, or even, regardless of fundamentally, no one agrees 100% on what is moral. Like, they don't. So, what does it matter that it's... I could just say the foundation of morality is common sense. Why does it have to be God? And then the question is, well, what the hell is God? Is it a being? Or is it just the ground of all being? If you want to go that direction, that it's just the ground of being, it's just what makes things be, that doesn't really tell you what's moral. You'd have to go a little bit further than that, which is kind of like what I'm bringing in, which is from the Destiny Principles, which is, are you considering what's best for all? What's best? If you consider what's best, that's where your morality would come from. I mean, I think the word morality is so fucking limited anyways, because it like implies God within it somehow. If you just consider what's the basis for why you should make a certain decision over another, you have to look at, is it actually best for you? Is it best for everyone? Is it harmful to anyone? At the very word, like at least, does it not harm anybody? Okay, that might be part of whether it's best or not. It might be something that's just like, I like chocolate ice cream and doesn't really benefit anybody. If I have chocolate ice cream, it only benefits me and my experience. But like, if I have to enslave somebody to make the chocolate ice cream, then it'd be like, well, maybe my preference for chocolate ice cream isn't really best, or I need to find a different way to get it. So it doesn't have to be everything you do ultimately is of some benefit to every single organism in existence. But at the same time, if it's not harming them, then there's no problem with it. But how much of the time do we actually justify not looking at what actually is the consequence of my preferences or the decisions I make? Because we already have a system that's not best, and if we just try to survive in it, it's like, well, the system's already fucked up, so yeah, I could participate in it, and I'm not directly harming anybody, but I can get what I want out of it. I can get a nice car, I can get a nice house, I can go on vacations, I can put my kids in private school, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just participating in the same system as everyone else. Hey, you're on the losing side of it. That's not my fault. I'm not directly harming you. See, that's like a self-dishonest way of thinking, because you don't realize you're just allowing the system to remain that way. It could change. Fundamentally, though, that's what everyone accepts is not possible, is that the system could change. So since you already accept that, you're like, well, since we're already starting at the point of you can't change the system, now all this other stuff has to come into play to determine what's moral, what's right, what's wrong, and so forth. But there's literally nothing you can do that's truly good and right when you're accepting a system that to survive, you have to participate in something that constantly is not best for everybody. So that's why I'm saying morality is a very limited concept, because it's already in the acceptance that things can't fundamentally change to be best for all. So it's like a second best version of best for all.
As a God, what is the purpose of life?
Well, in the Christian tradition, the purpose of life is to engage in voluntary, upward self-sacrifice so that the kingdom of heaven can be established on earth.
So you're trying to make it to heaven and avoid hell?
Yes, that's
Okay.
a good way of thinking.
To make it
So that the engage in well, and in the Christian tradition, the purpose of life is to engage in voluntary, upward self-sacrifice, so that the kingdom of heaven can be established on earth.
That's interesting because, well, for different reasons, but firstly, God is the unification of all moral principles, or it's the basis for the unification of all moral principles. And yet, there are different moralities. So he says in the Christian tradition, it's self-sacrifice in the service of creating heaven on earth. But in a different religion that still also accepts God as the basis of all morality, they don't believe in self-sacrifice. They believe in survival of their group, for example, and that's what is important. And you can sacrifice someone else so that you can survive. That's the Old Testament God. You can sacrifice others, just like Nick Fuentes was saying in the very beginning clip we watched. If it's about survival of the chosen people of God or whatever, you can kill and murder other people because it's about surviving them to get to a certain point where Jesus could come, and then he could tell everybody it's about self-sacrifice. But was it about Jesus' self-sacrifice, or is the lesson, like Jordan Peterson's trying to make it, no, it's about you realizing you have to sacrifice yourself in the service of creating heaven on earth? Is that, what does it mean, self-sacrifice? Right? Does it mean literally you are nothing? Yourself is nothing? So if you sacrifice yourself, like, think about it in the context of the word sacrifice, like you sacrifice an animal to God. Like you're literally like, I am a sacrifice. I'm sacrificing myself so that heaven on earth can be established. Who gets to enjoy heaven on earth then? What's the point of heaven on earth if the whole fundamental purpose of your life is to sacrifice yourself? So then what is heaven on earth? It's just everyone sacrificing themselves? Oh, once you establish heaven on earth, you no longer have to sacrifice yourself. I would say at a certain level, I agree with him in that if you believe that you are simply your consciousness, the identity that you've been given at birth as a human being with a name, with a personality, etc., and then you defend that to justify not having to change the system, you do have to sacrifice that, but that's ego. That's literally the I am. You have to not see yourself as simply that one thing and realize you're actually fundamentally much more than that. Not more powerful, although you actually are more powerful than you realize, because there's a lot more that any one individual could actually do, especially collectively as a group unified in principle to do what's best. But the sacrifice is not a sacrifice of yourself. Because if everyone sacrificed, it's funny because Jordan Peterson in many other cases has a problem with communism. But the problem that they have with communism is that it's all about sacrificing the individual to the collective. But isn't that what he's arguing? Maybe he's just trying to say what I'm trying to say, which is we have to sacrifice our egoistic points of like, I'm the most important thing that exists and only me matters. But that's not a self-sacrifice. That's just realizing I am me and everything is also me. So I should treat everything in a way that's best. And that includes me. That's not a self-sacrifice. The problem with self-sacrifice is you're actually nothing. You don't matter. And therefore, in the self-sacrifice, you subordinate yourself to God so that you can get the power of God. So you're not really sacrificing anything. You're just saying, like, I can basically do whatever I want in this life because I have God behind me. So it's this total verbal trick that they're doing to make it sound noble, to make it sound beautiful, but there's nothing beautiful about it. It's actually just an excuse to amplify your sense of self and your self-interest for the desire for some experience. But it's self-contradictory. Because if you sacrifice yourself for the creation of heaven on earth, what is the experience of heaven on earth? What is it? What is it if everyone has sacrificed themselves for it? Unless it just means what I'm saying, which is you just realize myself, my individual needs and wants do not have priority over what is best for all. Because really, when you say only my needs and my wants matter, only, you're not realizing the way to actually fulfill your needs and wants is to consider everyone equally and to create a system that would benefit everyone equally. You're going to get so much more than you could ever want, because most of your wants come from the fact that you experience yourself in a position of lack, a position of accepting that you are inferior, you're not good enough, you're less than reality. I mean, it makes sense. We've created a reality that we feel is bigger than us, God, and it's more powerful than us, and we are nothing by comparison. We've accepted this within ourselves, so we've manifested outwardly a reality that reflects that point to us. And then we use that to justify, see, I told you I wasn't anything. It's like, no, we've manifested that experience for ourselves because we're just not willing to consider we have to do what's best. That may feel like a sacrifice at some times, but it's not really a sacrifice. The only thing that you're sacrificing is your desire for certain energetic experiences that at the end of the day actually aren't even best for you. Imagine living in a world where you never had to fear for your survival. Now, someone might say, well, then why would anyone do any work? I mean, if you didn't have to worry about your survival, meaning you weren't fearing that there was competitors who don't care if you die just so they can have a yacht, just so they can have billions of dollars or whatever, or they can be in control of some system, monetary system, whatever, which is, it does happen in this world, believe it or not. If you had no fear of that, and like you looked at each human being, let's just talk about humans. You looked at each human being and you're like, that's me in another life. There would be like a mutual respect. There would be a mutual working together, cooperation. And we would value each other. And we would value ourselves. So like if I'm considering what's best, why would I be lazy? I'd be like, well, why should I expect someone else to put in effort and I don't put in any effort? Why don't we all put in effort? And if you saw that someone wasn't putting in effort, you'd be like, hey, what's going on? Like, why are you expecting everyone to do everything for you and you alone? Like, why don't you contribute? Why don't you find a way that you can add value to everything? And there may be some people in a position that literally physically can't, and you would be like, that's okay. They're in a form right now that I would not want to be in. I would not like to have no legs. So you know what? If I was in that position, what would I want? I want someone to also help me. But then they could maybe find other ways to contribute. You know, like I would be okay if some people benefited from the system and made beautiful art. And I don't want to make art. I want to build cabinets or something. Like, I mean, it's hard to even imagine what that would look like because so much of our imagination is influenced by being born into a system that literally is based on a false money system, based on debt, based on this false idea of scarcity that's not real, and based on a dependence of energy where no one's really considering how do we actually manage things in a way that's actually balanced where everybody has what they need. And right now, I mean, look at the system, what's going on. They are realizing that the way we've designed the system so far, it cannot sustain everybody on the planet having the lives that the people in the top of the system want. Everybody can't have that because it's not practical. Well, if everyone can't have it, then no one should have it. And you say, well, that's not fair. Okay, but then why don't we all just work together and figure out how we can all have enough or more than enough? And then I know for sure we could build from there. But instead, some people want it all now. Some people have basically nothing right now. Most people have basically nothing right now. And that's okay, apparently. Because I wish, it's okay for those people to be on top because, without them, we wouldn't have anything. Right? There's a really great audio from Bernard Pullman called Poverty is the Natural State of the Human. And it's a really good audio where he's handling that objection and showing that that's actually not true. That is a false belief that we have that just justifies capitalism in its current form, where some people have lives you can't even imagine how amazing they are, while most people suffer.
So you're trying to make it to heaven and avoid hell.
Yes, that's
Okay.
a good way of thinking about it.
What is the purpose of heaven? Do you understand? So here's the deal.
At
we
minimum,
can
it's
get into
the
an
opposite
infinite.
of endless suffering. How about
We
that?
can, okay, and so should we not try to achieve infinite suffering on planet Earth?
Obviously, he means achieve the elimination of infinite suffering. He's just misspeaking.
And if we can achieve infinite suffering on planet Earth
mean
without
avoiding-
God,
you mean avoid
avoiding it, if we can do that without God, then does that defeat your claim?
Well, yeah, except that it doesn't. You circumvented my initial definition because I said that by definition, God was the unified source of morality.
See the problem? This is a classic issue I have when talking to people who want to hold on to this idea of God. It's like, hey, let's create a world that's best for all. And it's like, well, we can't because of all these problems. And I'm like, well, what if we just solved those problems? Why do you need God involved? Like, let's just look at what are all the problems that we're not alleviating suffering unnecessarily. Like, let's just alleviate it. Let's do the things required to alleviate it. It's like, well, you can't because, like I said, God is the principle that determines what is the good things for everybody to have. And I'm like, so you can't use your own common sense? Everybody should have clean drinking water. Everybody should have enough food to eat. That's the food they prefer. That is reasonable for us to have. Like if somebody says, I just want to eat 1 billion pounds of Doritos every day. Well, then you have to have Doritos factories, and everyone has to be slaves to create Doritos factories. Like, learn to make your own fucking Doritos. It's not that hard. Okay, I'm not saying people can't have their preferences, but some people right now have all of their preferences, and most people have basically none of their preferences. And then you have the middle part where it's like you get this false idea of like, I have Nike shoes, and I have, you know, fucking the Apple iPhone and this and that. So I got some cool stuff, you know, but like you're still suffering on the inside. And now more and more, if you go on Instagram, you see lots of people being like, I don't know what the fucking purpose of my life is. I've got the iPhone, I've got the Nike shoes, I've got, you know, basically a nice, relatively nice place that I live in, but I just lost my job and I don't understand why I can't get another job. And I don't know what my fucking purpose is because everything I spent all of my life studying, I can't get a job using it, but I was told implicitly anyways growing up that I would be able to have enough money to like enjoy my life. And it's like, yeah, that's what most people on this planet have been experiencing this whole time. And all these people wanting to say, well, capitalism lifts everybody off poverty. Well, right now, it's bringing everybody, except a very small percentage of people, to a level of poverty that's hard for many of us, especially living in the West, to imagine. That's the track that it's on, especially if you're paying attention to what's going on in the Middle East right now.
And so if we engage in a moral exercise...
And when you're talking about morality, though, when you really reverse engineer it and you get it down to its root, you're a psychologist, it really seems like it just has to deal with motivation. People are saying there is a God,
It's more specific than that.
Well, so let me ask you this. So if there is a God and there is a moral code and it doesn't come at your benefit, are you going to follow it?
It depends on how you define your benefit. If
it's going to come at your expense, would you still follow it?
Expense.
If God came down and said, here is my moral code and you should follow it, but even if you follow it, you are still going to end up in hell, are you going to follow it?
Well, that was the question that was put to Job.
Okay, this is why I said Job earlier, because I was like, oh shit, don't get me started. Don't get Katie started on Job. But this is like, this was kind of the beginning as I was watching this where I started to like see so clearly, like, it's like they're almost actually trying to say the same thing. They're almost both trying to, in a different way, argue that, yes, we should have heaven on earth. And the whole purpose of life is to create that. And Jordan Peterson's like, you know, but you can't say that, like, he's like, yes, God is the principle of that it makes all of that make sense. And this guy's like, okay, but earlier you said that the purpose of life was to self-sacrifice for the creation of heaven on earth, to sacrifice yourself. And God is this apparent objective source of morality, which is totally unknowable by you, or at least at some level unknowable. So you can't really know the mind of God because you're just a finite being. I'm just using his words against him. So you can't really understand the logic of God. And if God came and said, look, to create heaven on earth, you're going to go to hell. It's just the way it's going to work out. Sorry, you have to go to hell to create heaven on earth, you have to sacrifice yourself. That's the whole point, right? It's the point is you sacrifice yourself for the creation of heaven on earth. He never said for your own. See, like when I was explaining it, I was bringing in the point of if it's not to your benefit, it's not best for all. So there's no room for the argument this guy's making back to Jordan Peterson. Like if you were to ask me that, I'd be like, that is not my definition of what's best for all. If you have to be in hell while everyone else is good, that's not heaven on earth. That we haven't achieved that then. That's not the starting point. That's not the end point. But Jordan Peterson said that the purpose of life was to self-sacrifice for the creation of heaven on earth. And you need this objective source of morality to know, apparently, what are the good things to do to get there. Because you can't just fucking figure it out yourself. You can't just say, look, I'm going to sit here and use common sense. I'm going to bounce my ideas off of others. They're going to use common sense. We're both going to be honest with ourselves. We're going to call each other out when we're just holding on to a bias or opinion that actually isn't best. We're going to help each other through that. We're going to support each other to get through that point and be like, hey, look, I really think this is a self-interest point. They're not really considering all these points. Let me explain to you what those points are and help them understand. Because we can't do that, apparently, we need God as the objective source, which is self-defeating because there's billions of people who believe in God, and the vast majority of them don't even agree on exactly what that even means. So in practice, it doesn't fucking accomplish the thing that it's claimed to be or claim to help us accomplish. It doesn't, because then there couldn't be Jews, Christians, and Muslims that disagree because they all have God as the source of morality. Well, but their God is not the real source of morality because I don't intuitively agree with that source, that type of morality that they're suggesting. But it's not based on your intuitive points only, because theirs apparently is based on their intuitive points. Theirs got it wrong. Yours got it right. Wow, how convenient is that? Yours never get it wrong. Interesting. Well, no, sometimes I get it wrong, but that's when it's me and I'm not sacrificing myself and I'm not really just trusting God. Okay, so if God came and said, here's the moral things, here's what's right and here's what's wrong, and when you play all this out to create heaven on earth, ultimately you're going to go to hell. And you say, well, that's not right. And he's like, you're not the source of objective morality. I am. So you can't say it's wrong that you go to hell. It's right because I, as the God, determine what is right. You don't get to use your subjective ideas of, well, it doesn't feel good for me. It's like, what does that have to fucking do with the authority of God? Nothing. You see, like, I'm really trying to make it clear. I've really considered this, okay? It doesn't make sense. And yet, both people actually are arguing, even though neither one of them can say it, they actually just want a world that's best for everybody. I don't think Jordan would disagree with that. Like, maybe in some kind of, if he's trying to defend some particular thing, but if he was just being honest, I think he'd be like, yeah, I mean, a world that's best for everybody, that would be heaven on earth. And I think this other guy would say it too. If it's best for everybody, because what is he saying? Well, what if it's not actually good for you? And then he's like, well, by definition, that's not possible. It's like, okay, so we're in agreement. It should include the best for everybody. And this is really the point I want to make with this whole stream tonight is like, because I titled it something like, the reason why Christians and atheists can't agree or something on morality is because they can't just both say, you know what, really, we should just create a reality that's best for all. And we got to figure out what all means. It's going to take a lot of work. We still don't even understand how reality works fundamentally. So maybe we're going to get some things wrong. But why don't we just at least try to go in that direction instead of saying, well, no, but you have to believe in God first. Okay, well, then you're going to allow other people who claim to believe in God to do a bunch of horrendous shit. And you can't call them out because you said you can't know. And you can't have your own ideas of what's right and wrong. It has to be from God. Well, they have different ideas and they say it's from God. So you'll never be able to agree on this point. If you believe that God is necessary fundamentally to determine what's right and wrong, you will never get agreement on this earth between human beings. But the reason why I would say people think that that's necessary is because they believe you can't get agreement amongst human beings. Now, let me be clear. I say it's possible to get agreement. Once everybody accepts, oh, we actually all just want a world that's best for all. Now we've got to get rid of all the stuff that we're holding on to that actually isn't best within ourselves. Every opinion, every belief, every idea, and really just each of us take the responsibility out of our own volition, voluntarily, like Jordan Peterson said, it's a voluntary thing. We voluntarily go through and strip away all the things within ourselves. We're like, oh, that's clearly not best. That's clearly not best. That's clearly not best. Getting in the way of considering what's best for all. You do that enough and you're like, all right, I've got down to the core of who I am. And now I only want to do what's best. Now let me add things to myself on that basis. Let me add knowledge and information on that basis. Now you have a new starting point and a new principle from which you live your life. You don't need God for that. Because I would say if God is a real thing, which it's not, but even if it was, that's what God would say to do. But as human beings, we're like, no, we're such little worthless pieces of shit. We could never know the mind of God. So yeah, he would say that, but I could never know all those things. So I just have to follow God. And I'm like, so now we're right back at the beginning. That actually is one of those beliefs I'm saying you have to strip away, because when you strip it away and you let go of your fear of death, because you're going to die anyways, it's inevitable. Why be afraid of it? Okay? It's going to happen. Just embrace it, accept it, get over it. Okay? You're here for a finite period of time. You don't know what the fuck happens when you die. Okay? I could tell you what makes sense, what's going to happen. You don't have to believe that. You could just realize you don't fucking know right now. Okay. If you don't know, what's your first instinct? Oh, well, I got to figure out how do I keep existing? I don't know. Like, I want to keep existing. Right. So you already started off not considering what Jordan Peterson said, which is the whole point is to sacrifice yourself. So you're not even doing that right now. So you can't live that shit because you're just afraid. And I would say once you're no longer afraid, you would hear something like sacrifice yourself to create heaven on earth. You would go, oh, myself, the self that actually is the self that needs to be sacrificed is not my real self. Because even if I sacrifice all the things within me, I get rid of all the things within me that aren't best, I'm still here. I still exist. Even if my personality was gone, all of my ideas, I would still exist here. So I haven't lost anything because I'm still here. Meaning, life is still, I am still alive. I'm still life. I'm still here. What else do you need? You have already within you, as you, the most valuable possible thing that could ever exist. All the things everyone's looking for in the concept of God, you are already it. But if you then narrow your focus into it's just this little old me, you go into fear of loss over this little old me thing that you think is real, but it's just a temporary form that you're in. Just like a tree. A tree doesn't have fear of death, but it doesn't have a consciousness, a mind system with thoughts and energies running through it that it constantly is mistaking for who it is. If you can stop all those things within yourself, you would have no more fear. And when you have no more fear, you won't try to abuse, because all abuse is coming from a fear of loss, a fear of losing something. The desire to gain is out of the fear of loss. Once you remove the fear of loss, then gaining takes on a new meaning, because you realize the only true gain is when the balance between all things that's considering what's best is improved, where everything improves, everything gains. It's hard to think about it like that when you're like, no, it's just me. So you think of everyone else gaining as a sacrifice of yourself because you're defining your sense of self as just your consciousness. It's your memories, it's your personality, but all of that was added to you when you were born. And you developed a lot of it in the process of growing up as a child and as a young adult and as an adult. You've added a lot of information to yourself. That's not who you are. Like, if you can understand what a tree really is and what a cat really is, and what anything really is, you're that. That thing that unites all things actually, which really is everything is equally valuable. Then you'll start to see like, oh, okay. That's what I am. But I'm placing a hierarchy because I'm starting with the assumptions that humans are at the top of the food chain. We're the best. We get to dominate. Everything is for us. You lose your sense of responsibility to reality. And then you know what happens? War, suffering, pain, all the things that Nick Fuentes was saying are penalties for disobeying God. It's not penalties for disobeying God. It's the consequence of not having common sense and self-honesty to do what's best for all. It's just a natural consequence of not doing what's best. That's it. It's got nothing to do with God whatsoever. God is a false idea that was implanted into us so that we would always give our power to some being out there, so that one being could live like the king, like the Lord over all, and all power and control would flow to that one being. That's all it is.
Antichrist, right? Because they were required. Hang on, I'm answering your question. They were required to withstand trials that would break anyone and maintain their upward orientation regardless.
See, again, he's taking the story of Job and turning it into like this lesson about just trials and tribulations and pushing through. But like, no, it was the God also, that's the source of morality, that was like, that like allowed the devil, I can't remember if it's like he did it or he allowed the devil to do it, to like kill his entire family. It's like, oh, but at the end he was restored because he got new kids. And I'm like, dude, if you're a parent and you think it's a replacement because one child dies and you get another kid, that's so fucked up. But that's not the lesson we're supposed to learn. It's just about pursuing through trials and tribulations and not losing your sense of principle. But what was the principle he was not wanting to let go of? Following God, obeying God, the God that's doing the things to him. It makes no fucking sense. So Jordan Peterson at the same time wants to tell atheists they don't know what they're rejecting, but then he doesn't know what most people actually think that story means, which is that it's just about obeying God at all costs, no matter what. Because when you do that, guess what happens? He rewards you times 1,000. Really? Did God reward him with children? Or did he fuck his wife and she got pregnant? How did God reward him? He could have just had more kids at any time. Why was it necessary for God to kill his kids? Oh no, but that's not real, Cameron. That's not literal. You know, you're taking it out of context. Well, what's the moral of the fucking story then? Just persevering through tribulations? You could have just fucking... Okay, so then God's not real. It's got nothing to do with God. It's just the idea of persevering through trials and tribulations. Wow. Okay, that's a great lesson. Awesome. But that story, unfortunately, in the context of the Bible, reinforces in a lot of people's minds that there's actually a being out there that takes responsibility for everything. And then that being they believe in tells them they're going to go to heaven as long as they maintain an allegiance to anything that calls itself Christian, including a government that literally is doing war on people. Because there's a lot of people that are in that mental trap right now.
And they did that with the motivation of believing that this omnipotent, all-loving God would somehow turn it into a benefit. So they still did it solely for their benefit. So
no,
when you,
yes,
they did. Yes, they did.
Hang on. Let's define benefit. Like, if I did something for your sister, would that be to your benefit? Like, how are you defining your benefit? Do you mean one of your whims gratified now? Or do you mean you and everyone you love and know over some reasonable span of time? Like,
so
what do you mean by
when you're talking about...
See, so it's almost like he's trying to say what I'm saying. But then why do you need God in any of that? Why is it that your wife and your kids are fundamentally more important than other people's kids? You could say, well, Cameron, you don't love your kids more than others? That's not the point. If I allow a system to abuse other people's kids, then my kids grow up in a world where presumably I made sure that they didn't get abused. So they're the only people who didn't get abused in this hypothetical scenario. Who are all the people who were abused by the same system that my children benefited from gonna be resentful towards? That's common sense. If I allow a system that puts people into poverty where every day they wake up and they don't have enough to eat, they're going to hate the system. And they're going to look at me where I knew how to play by the rules of the system and extract value of it, and I had enough to eat. They're going to look at me like, motherfucker, I didn't get the education you got. I didn't get the examples you got. I got beaten and abused and yelled at and molested or whatever happened. And you had a good life from the same system. And then the audacity for me to be like, well, that's because, God... But that system is the thing from the fallen state. So like when fucking Nick Fuentes says, well, but that was the fallen world. Now we're redeemed. The system hasn't changed. And then here, this guy's like, well, what if he just like created heaven on earth? And Jordan Peterson says, what if you just create heaven on earth? Okay, let's just do that. But we can't get agreement with everybody about which is the God that we should obey all of his precepts and his codes to create the heaven on earth. And so I don't think I finished this point, but it was like, the way I look at it, people don't believe we can get everyone to agree on how to go about creating a world that's best. And because they don't think that's actually possible, they're like, well, I don't want to go insane and think it's not possible, so I'm going to imagine there's a God that'll make it work, and if we just follow that. But now you take the argument from just us debating what would be best, actually, based on considering the reality we're in, to arguing about which God tells us what's best. You're never, ever going to get agreement on this. At least if we just shift the focus back to, let's actually consider what's best and debate that and look at it and consider that. And not and like harm each other as little as possible in the process. If I'm having to harm you, I'm already like not considering what's best. That's at least a conversation where we could at some point actually come to agreement. It's going to require everybody being able to read properly, process information effectively, go through all of their points within themselves, all the information within themselves, and look at, where do I believe something that actually isn't in alignment with the reality we all sense in common. That's the common sense part. I can't fucking tell you anything about the divine pinnacle peak experience, and I can't describe that in any way that has any bearing on the fact that you need clean drinking water. We shouldn't blow up water desalination plants, no matter who it is. Well, but if you don't blow them up, those people will come up and they actually fundamentally hate you. So, if you don't kill them now, when they grow up, they're going to kill you and your kids, and they're going to bomb your thing. Like, hold on, let's just stop. I'm saying we should also talk to them and tell them, don't do that anymore. We won't do it anymore. You don't do it anymore. I know we don't trust each other yet, but let's just start over. It's like, well, it's not possible. Original sin, free choice, Satan, God, it's only God can do it. That's never a conversation that's going to resolve in anything. Because there's nothing grounding it in physical reality. You want to talk about the ground of all being. Why don't you just talk about the ground that you're fucking standing on as an actual being here on Earth? Like, okay, we exist. I don't need to fucking dwell on the fact that we exist. We exist. Well, what causes us to exist? Who cares? Who cares what causes us to exist? We exist. Let's make the best of what we have here. Well, no, you can't, because until you understand what causes you to exist, there's no way you could ever work out getting clean drinking water to everybody. It just wouldn't be possible because, like when you drink a sip of water, you can't even drink it until, you know what the ground of existence and being is. Like, really. Meanwhile, fucking Thomas Aquinas probably always had enough clean drinking water. I mean, to the degree that people had it back in ancient times or medieval times or whatever.
Whims. I think you're talking about something that's more dopamine. When you're talking about morality, you're talking about something that's more serotonin and more ultimately satisfying. So you and I agree on.
Yeah, I think when you try to boil it down to just chemicals, you're just talking about feelings. Morality, again, I think he's right, even though I don't agree with him. Like, yeah, morality really ultimately just comes down to your feelings. That's where this intuition about morality comes from. It's just your feeling of what's right and wrong. It's not actually considering like hard logic, common sense, like what actually is best. In the interest of time, I want to go to this guy. I think it's this one. I think this was the one I found very interesting as well.
My final claim is that atheists accept Christian morality, but deny the religion's foundational stories. Hi there.
It's very nice to meet you.
What's
I'm
your
Ian.
name?
I'm Ian.
Hi, Ian.
Yes. So God says that you can own people as property. He says that you can beat them with a rod too. He commands genocide in Deuteronomy, in Numbers, and in Samuel. I mean, they have a goddamn baby barbecue in Numbers. Like, is all of this in line with Christian ethics?
No.
So then God doesn't fit.
I think this might be the one I'm looking for. Actually.
Jordan, nice to meet you.
Very zippy. What's your name?
I'm Liam.
Hi, Liam. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Not too bad. I'm
good.
surrounded by atheists.
My question to you, let me scoot in, would be, what does it mean to accept Christian values precisely, or Christian morality?
It means to aim up as hard as you can, no matter what happens to you.
Who doesn't think that that is of value? Like, if you're Peter Thiel, if you're Stalin, if you're Chairman, what's the guy, Xi of China, if you're, like, who doesn't think that? If you're a North Korean fucking Kim Jong-un worshiping person, you don't think you should always aim up and try to achieve things. Like, it's like you don't need fucking God to understand that point. And if you're saying, well, that's all God is, okay. But then you're always aiming up. What are you aiming towards? Just have the most Ferraris in your garage? Like, doesn't Andrew Tate live by that principle? Isn't he always aiming upwards? Or would the criticism be, well, but he doesn't do things that are best for others? Oh, so now we're talking about best for all.
Okay.
Okay.
So I think that that's a very broad definition of what Christian
Yeah, but it'll
morality
come
is.
in handy at some point in your life.
Right. But I think that many different disciplines.
See, like, that's so condescending. Because when he says that's a very broad definition, Jordan Peterson's acting like he's saying it's not a valuable thing. But what he's really saying is that's not what Christians think is Christian values. Like, you're giving a very broad generalization. And what's fascinating to me about it, okay, here's my little conspiracy corner. I think Jordan Peterson was sent here by the Daily Wire as a secret agent. I think they switched it on purpose. Somebody made a deal. They got Jordan Peterson in here as the quote-unquote Christian so that he wouldn't make any arguments from the basis of, like, one specific form of Christianity. They wanted somebody who would represent Christianity in a way where it would still be inclusive of Judaism. That's just my perspective on it. So you notice he never gives, like, a very specific Christian view on anything. He'll say things like self-sacrifice, but that's good for all the Christians to hear. But there's never anything really specific. Like, no, Jesus died. He died for our sins, and we must worship Jesus, and we must believe him with our whole hearts. Like, he never says anything like that throughout this whole discussion. He makes it this very broad philosophical thing. And I'm like, okay, but you're not arguing with a Christian then, actually.
And theologies.
Well, you asked for a truncated answer. Eh?
Right.
I mean, there's other ways of representing the
Yeah.
situation, but I wanted to give you something that was kind of foundational briefly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It doesn't mean it's, exhaustive.
Yeah.
I could say that you would have to believe that Christ is God and he died for your sins.
Oh, there we go.
Right? But that's in a very difficult way to understand. That's the same claim.
Yeah. If there
You see what he did there, though? He's saying that the idea of Christ dying for your sins is really almost like metaphorically saying you should aim upward. Okay, so then it's just a story. Is that all it is? It's just a story? Like, you could get the same story by watching Star Wars. Like, watch Star Wars. Well, but that's based on the Christian idea of this and that. It's like, no, it's not, because the Christian idea is just a story too, right? Or is it like, did it actually happen? I mean, there's a lot of problems. Unfortunately, they're not even really talking about Christianity. But there's so many problems with the idea that God sent himself to die and that was somehow a sacrifice. What did God lose? Like, if you sacrifice yourself in the context of, like, you actually give up your life here on earth, don't you feel like you lost something? I'm not arguing you actually did, but I'm saying, don't you feel like you lost something? So when they say God gave up his short 30-year window compared to infinity, it's like nothing. It wasn't a sacrifice because he is still alive. But I guess that's the lesson. You sacrifice yourself and you just believe that you're still going to be alive afterwards. But you didn't, in the sacrifice, create anything that was real. You sacrificed yourself for the idea that when you die, you'll go to heaven. You didn't sacrifice yourself and all of your ego in the creation of heaven, because you don't create heaven. God does. But Jordan Peterson says, like, you're creating it somehow. So you see, it's like he's all over the place. So he's being very slippery.
There are other theologies and disciplines that have similar types of values.
Yeah.
How then is that definition mean? Like, wouldn't those also be Christian values under your definition?
That's a good question. I spent a lot of time
Mm-hmm.
studying different religious systems from all over the world and found multiple interesting layers of concordance.
Right.
So, for example, in ancient Egypt, their god Horus, who was the reviving god of the totalitarian state, the corrupt he was the god of attention. Right, and the Jews hypothetically came out of Egypt, and there was crosstalk between
I like how he said hypothetically.
Egyptian and Jewish foundational morality, and then that bled into Christianity. I mean,
So Egyptian ideas bled into Judaism, bled into Christianity. So it's not coming from God, because the Egyptians didn't follow the God of the Bible, of Yahweh. What is he even saying?
human beings all over the world have come up with moral systems that fit roughly into a pattern, and they're very usefully studied. Now, I learned a lot about Christianity by studying Taoism, for example, like a lot. So I think you can make a case that Christianity formalized the landscape of good and evil more comprehensively and in more detail than any other religious system, and I think that that's part of the reason that it defeated paganism and spread so broadly across the world.
No, that's not why. It defeated paganism and spread so broadly because it promised people an afterlife. So they could accept the system of suffering here on earth because they were promised something better. So they accept their position as a slave while the elite continue to rule. That's it. It's not that complicated. Why can't he say that? Why can't he acts like he's studied everything and he knows everything. Why doesn't he fucking talk about the secret societies? Why doesn't he talk about anything of like how things actually work? It's all this idealistic, hypothetical stuff.
The West and is still dominant, still understructures our culture, for example.
The way you feel about Horus or Taoism or something is how I feel about Christian morals, I think.
Yeah, but how do I feel about them?
Well, that you took inspiration from them, you learned from them. Maybe
That's a good start,
Right.
you know, because I would say that actually constitutes belief. You know, like you said, well, look.
Right.
This is funny. I like what this guy comes back with.
In Noah, in the story of Noah, right? Noah is inspired by the apprehension that all hell is going to break loose. Okay,
Yeah.
he regards that inspiration as God.
That's just saying you fucking faced reality and you saw consequences and you were like, fuck, I better do something. But I just call that God. So you're just saying God is the natural consequence of not doing what's best for all. Okay. Do I need to believe in that? Or do I just need to accept that as like, it makes sense?
Okay.
Right, and when God comes to Abraham, he comes to Abraham as the spirit of adventure. It's inspiration. One of the definitions of God in the Old Testament, unsurprisingly, given the derivation of the word, is inspiration. And so if you take inspiration from Christian ideas, then insofar as you do that, you are in fact a believer, which was my...
So if I watch Star Wars and I see, you know, at the end of I think it's like the third movie, when, you know, Darth Vader doesn't want to, he's kind of like under the spell, so to speak, or he's trapped by he's gone so far into the dark side and done so many things. He says to Luke, it's like, it's too late for me. I can't come to the light, you know, the light side, is that what they call it? The Force, whatever. I can't. It's too late for me. So then he allows Darth Sidious to like start electrifying Luke to the point that it looks like he's going to kill him. And then finally at the very end, right before he's probably about to kill him, he picks up Darth Sidious and throws him over the thing down into the whatever pit or whatever it is and kills Darth Sidious, right? And then as a result, he dies. So since I'm inspired by that and I say, you know what, no matter, even if I feel like I've gone so far down into a path of things that are not good, not best, you know what, I could still change. I can still do what is best in this moment. I don't have to accept this. I'm inspired by that. So now I believe in Star Wars. Like, what kind of a fucking retarded statement is this?
My point with regards to atheists
Correct.
not understanding.
But have
what
you
their
taken
objective-
inspiration?
But like, they don't understand. Like, I just gave you a story about So now I'm a Christian because the same ideas in Christianity, he sacrificed himself for the good, even through the temptations and everything. So now I'm a Christian because I believe in Star Wars. Like, he's just playing with words.
From Taoism or from studying Egyptian mythology?
Definitely.
So then you believe them under that definition?
Yeah, but I've incorporated them into something I think that's more comprehensive.
Is it possible to take inspiration and to appreciate the teachings without being a believer in their truth claims?
It depends. No, I don't think so, but I think you see.
So I have to believe that Darth Vader was real? Or it was just a story and it inspired me. So I believe in it in the sense of that I believe there was value in the act that Darth Vader did. But why does it have to be that he's real? Like it actually happened?
See, there are different kinds of truth claims, right? There's propositional truth claims, which are the truth claims of what you say. And then there's embodied truth claims, which is the truth claims of what you do. That should be prioritized. Optimally.
Yeah, I get the distinction. You could say you believe in Jesus, but that's the different than living and embodying the actual principles that you say, that believing in Jesus. Like, I could say I believe in Star Wars because that was really valuable what he did, Darth Vader, but I would never actually do something like that. So I don't really believe in it because I'm not acting in a way in accordance with that.
What you say and what you do would be brought into harmony. But I would say if you had to prioritize, it should be what you attend to and what you act first. And that's what Christ actually says in the Gospels, because he points to the Pharisees, for example, who say all the right things, but don't do any of the right things. And
yeah, they do. They did all the things that God told them to do. God said, do these specific things. Okay, he said, do these specific things. And when they don't, like, think about the Old Testament. This part is so crazy. In the Old Testament, go back to the Amalekites, what we talked about earlier. What was it, Samuel 1:15? Well, I'm not going to pull it up. It's up there, though. But 1 Samuel 15. God said to slaughter all the Amalekites, don't leave anyone left alive, even the women, the children, the animals, everything. They saved the king and some cattle and sheep and lambs to sacrifice later for God. And God, said, this guy's not even fit to be king because he didn't follow my commandments perfectly. The instructions, the rule book of specific actions. Wouldn't you be really confused if you were them? And okay, I'm gonna play devil's advocate for the defense of Jordan Peterson. Yes, but you see, they didn't follow the spirit of what he was saying. The spirit was complete obedience, no matter what. Okay, so that was the lesson. Completely obey and follow the rules exactly like God said. Fast forward to the Pharisees. They're like the most scrupulous of all the little details because they remember the story. They're like, dude, fuck, man. Like, if we even make one little mistake, God is not happy. We got to do it 100% by the book. Then Jesus, in this story, I think Jesus is the villain. Okay, in my interpretation of it, he comes along like this fucking arrogant asshole of you Pharisees, you follow the rules, but do you have the Spirit of God within you? Do you have the love of humanity within you? The love for all beings and creatures? And they're like, what are you fucking talking about, dude? God never said to any of us to ever think like that. Ah, yes. See, you have not the Spirit of God in you. And he's like, what are you talking about? Like, we've been doing all the rules. He's like, the rules. These rules, what are these rules? These are not God's things. These are merely words on paper, rules that you follow perfectly, like obedient slaves of some master. You do not embody the spirit of the master who cares for all. And they're like, okay, this is news to us because we've literally just been trying to follow God exactly what he said. And we really thought we were doing everything right. And now you're coming along saying it's totally not that? And he's like, yes, because I am God, and I am saying to you, this is my true nature. And they're like, dude, okay. It's like, I want to believe you because, some of the things you're saying, they make sense. Like, it really does kind of make sense. But I also remember that story about the Amalekites, and, kind of seems like the story is you should obey exactly what God said. So, on the off chance that he's just testing us again, it says if somebody claims they're God and that they're blaspheming and we got to put them to death, I'm sorry, it's just, I don't know what to do. And he's like, don't worry, you may kill me, and you will then be redeemed in your sins. They're like, what sins? They're like, not obeying God? Like, yes. What exactly is the fucking moral here? What is the purpose of this story? I really think Thomas Jefferson had it right.
Points out very clearly that that's not acceptable.
I don't know that the Christian morality, those principles originate in Christianity, because you brought up other things that predate Christianity that you can very closely tie connections to.
Well, I don't think they do originate precisely. I mean,
Right.
I don't think the Christian claim is exactly that they originate in Christianity.
So then, was Jesus God on earth here to tell people a new version of God? Or did they humans already thought them up themselves? And he was just like, oh yeah, kind of all those things you guys have been saying, that's pretty much what it is. And then also, go back to Nick Fuentes, it was God's chosen people, and they had to survive. Even though the Egyptians basically had some of the Christian principles in them, and but also the Egyptians were like not God's chosen people, so they had to be slaughtered and beaten down because they were going against God's chosen people. Even though they pretty much had, because we had to preserve these people so Jesus could come and tell us the stuff that pretty much some of the other people were already saying, but since they weren't chosen by God, they're really not important, because until Jesus would come and say those same things, we had to keep these group of people alive so Jesus could come and say those things, even though other people who said it that weren't chosen by God also said the same things.
If I'm living those values, how is it that I'm living the Christian values and maybe not the Egyptian values or something else?
Well,
there. You've been voted out by
that was good. No.
That was good? I feel like also, this is just my own little personal opinions here, but I feel like Jordan Peterson is very defensive and also very this kind of superior thing. It's like, I'm Jordan Peterson. I'm like, hey, that was pretty good, kid. You did pretty good against me, Jordan Peterson. Dude.
That was good. Yeah.
Man, there was one other guy. It wasn't that guy. That was still pretty interesting, though. But there was one guy he talked to that was so fascinating. It wasn't that kid. That was just annoying.
You've said that worship is when you prioritize and sacrifice for something, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But there's a hierarchy in there.
Sure. So I prioritize and sacrifice for my wife more than I would prioritize and sacrifice for a random person on the street, right?
Probably, yeah.
Presumably. Do I worship
I don't know.
my
I've
wife?
seen some pretty
Oh,
bad.
no, this one's irrelevant.
Domain of religion is the domain of morality and purpose. Yes, exactly. And also that science is actually structured, at least in part technically, to eliminate such considerations from its purview a priori.
Okay.
Right? That's why we...
I agree with that. In science... In science, it doesn't give you common sense. You have to have common sense. You have to consider what's best. And then when you're doing science, you're testing things in that context. Scientists come up with all kinds of shit and technologies. LSD was created by scientists. There was nothing good about that.
We define science as...
And then they tested it on people, in the public, and did mind control experiments and shit. So that's I think where he's coming from is if you just have science, because it's this reductionist view that atheists, again, whatever, I'm not defending atheists, but the problem is an atheist just means you don't believe in God. So it's not a thing in itself. But there's the prototypical version of an atheist that's science can tell us everything, and it can't. Because science is a process of observation, coming up with an idea, testing it against reality. That's all it is. And you can find out something about reality, like how to make a gun, and then you can use that gun to kill people and murder them. Science is sort of neutral when it comes to what is actually best, right? But it's really not the science that's the problem. And I think that's the point he's making, is science itself. You can't say, well, I have science, I don't need morality, I don't need any idea of what's good or bad because I have science and science will guide me all the way. No, it won't, because it'll just allow those who have the starting point of survival of the fittest to take advantage of those who don't understand the conclusions of science.
Value free. But that has to be wrong, because scientists have to prioritize their attention towards something before they can even engage in observation.
Okay.
And that act of prioritization of attention is a value predicated act. And so I can continue. There's all sorts of things we have to assume about science before it can take place.
Okay, so what I'm specifically pointing out here is about religion in particular, since you yourself are a Christian, right?
People debate about that, and I generally don't discuss it publicly.
He doesn't discuss it publicly, but he was there to be the Christian arguing against atheists, but he doesn't want to say what he actually believes. Anyways, I think that's actually the bigger picture of this specific debate, unfortunately, is like, it's just like kind of a psyop to make atheists look bad. I think that was the purpose of it. I don't really care if atheists look bad, but I did want to just look at some of these points, because you can see there's no way any of these people will ever come to agreement. And there was one specific guy in here that point really came through, and maybe I already played it and I just thought it was something else, or I couldn't find it. I don't know. But it's like when I'm watching this, I'm like, they just can't both say we should just base our decisions on what's best for all. You say, well, how can you know what's best? I love that objection. I can just use common sense. You say, well, how can you say what's best for somebody else? Well, okay, maybe I can't. Why don't you tell me what's best for you? And then let's talk about it and see what I think is best and what you think is best, and then let's have a conversation about that. But if we start the conversation with, we can't know what's best, only God can, then you can't even have a conversation. If your definition of best is you have to obey God, see, at least there we have something to look at. Because what I'm trying to bring through is that if you take that as your premise, the problem is you can't ever actually know what God wants. Because you have apparently free will, you have to, at the end of the day, realize no matter what God you accept, you're the one doing the accepting. And you have to take responsibility for that. You can't say, somehow I lucked out and I chose the right God, and thank God that I did, because now I know what's right and wrong. That's a trick you're doing within yourself. You're either deliberately not looking at the whole point for yourself, or you're just not doing it at all. And whether you realize you're not or you do, like, it doesn't really matter. Like, you're not actually taking the responsibility of, okay, so what does God say is best? Let's look at it. But every time, if you really push the point, what I've found with somebody who believes in God, it always comes down to the details of what is best don't really matter compared to we have to obey God. And that's fundamentally the problem with the concept, is the purpose of obeying God is so you know what to do that is best. But you don't want to look at the details of what you think God says to do is best within you, because you inevitably will have conflict. But then when you have that conflict with those points, you're like, well, it's just because I'm fucked up and I'm broken, so I just got to follow God. Okay, but then somebody else says they follow God, and they say certain things are what you're supposed to do, and you don't agree. Like Muslims say you're supposed to pray 5 times a day, let's say. As a Christian, you're like, no, you don't. You could pray, but you don't have to like follow specifically every, whatever the specific prayers are. You don't have to do that. But they believe that it is what God says to do. So is that what's best to do according to God, or is it not? Is praying the rosary best to God? Is going to confession best for God? Or is it just reading the Bible? Like, it doesn't really explicitly lay it out. And some people say, yes, it does. I read the Bible. It says it all out. I'm like, well, I can find another person that's read the same stuff. They're like, but if you take this thing into consideration and that, like, it actually means something different. So there's just no solution there. So that's a lot of time spent for me to just get to the point of saying, for those of you who are still watching, or maybe you're watching the recording, you've got this far, What we're looking for is people who are like, you know what? All of that's irrelevant. It can never provide a solution to create a reality here on Earth that is actually best objectively for everybody here. Because we could start with the agreement of, if I was in the shoes of somebody else, would I be okay with their experience? Not with you, with your preferences right now, but if you were actually them in their shoes, would you be suffering? Would you be okay with the experience? It's very obvious when we say like a rapist, right? And they're raping somebody. If you place yourself in the shoes of the person being raped, you're like, no, that would be terrible. I wouldn't want to be raped. That's why rape is wrong. Okay. Is it because God says it's wrong? Or is it because nobody wants to be raped? And then you even go further and look at the mind of the rapist. They're possessed by a thought process within themselves that is totally doesn't make any sense. Raping someone isn't even best for the person who's doing it. You can say, well, they think it's best. No, they don't. They don't actually think it's best. They're fucked up inside. And I can say that without having to resort to God. If you're doing something to someone that's abusing them, why would you do that unless something fucked up is going on inside? Like, it doesn't make sense to do it. There's no benefit to you other than a temporary experience of energy. And so if you're going to have a temporary experience of energy, should it be at the expense of someone else? You would say no. Okay, so let's just apply that universally. But you don't want to do that because you don't want to look at all the temporary experiences of energy that you have that might actually at some level contribute to the harm that our system is creating in this world. And that's not me hating God. That's not me hating the system. The system is just what we're accepting and allowing. It's not actually a thing in itself. It's the sum total of all of the things that we accept and allow within all of us collectively and individually. That's all it is. So the other problem, I would say, with Christianity, one of the major fundamental problems, which they didn't even get into, is the idea that you actually can't change. Only God can forgive you. And you deserve forgiveness because God is so graceful. You don't actually deserve it, but I mean, you can get it from God because he's so gracious. He's so gracious. Even though you are so fucked up, he's so gracious, he'll forgive you anyways. That is not best. That's why people have a hard time forgiving somebody who does something horrible. And they say, like, well, so Hitler could be forgiven at the last minute? It's like, well, according to your logic, he could. That doesn't make sense to you, does it? You're like, I just don't see how that's possible. It's like, exactly. It doesn't make sense. If somebody did something in the past and they actually have changed within themselves and said, I've become a new person that totally rejects what I did. Meaning, not that you're dissociating yourself from it, but you're like, no, that's not me anymore. I don't operate from the same starting point that caused me to do those things. I now no longer accept that. And now I behave differently. And I can show that over time, that this is who I am now. And you can see it and you can trust it and you can see the consistency of it. That's self-change. But you'd have to forgive yourself first for what happened. It's like, okay, why did I do that? What happened here? What was going on within me? What were all the thoughts that I was participating in? The jealousies, the frustrations, the anger. And to what degree to that is because I was born into a system that really doesn't have my best interests at heart, that created all these conditions, that created all of those thoughts in the first place, that I then accepted and that I then participated in, which eventually led me to acting in an automatic behavior, to, in alignment with those thoughts. So it's about self-responsibility, and you have to forgive yourself because you're the only person that can change you. And I think that right there is one of the reasons why God is such a dangerous concept, actually, and why it's so harmful to a reality that should be best for all. It's a barrier to it. Not because I hate God, because you can't hate something that's not real. The only thing to hate is the acceptance that you can't change, that you're just stuck and only something more powerful than you can do anything about it. Because that really is just an excuse to continue accepting yourself the way you are. Obviously, people react to Christianity because they're like, well, it just makes you feel guilty about everything. You might even feel like I'm doing that right now. Like, make you feel guilty about all this. Like, no, you don't have to feel guilty. If you feel guilty, that would be a point to forgive. But if you're being self-honest within the forgiveness, you aren't forgiving yourself just to alleviate the feeling of guilt so you can continue doing the things that you felt guilty about. So if you're stuck in guilt and you're reacting to someone saying you can change because you're being judged, you're judging yourself. Because you're saying, I'm not going to change it. That's the point where self-responsibility comes in, and you have to realize, like, I'm the only one who can forgive myself. God can't forgive me. Because if God forgives me, but I don't change, what did the forgiveness do other than just alleviate my sense of guilt, shame, etc.? And then I think you'll realize, if you really dig deep within this, your relationship towards God is actually one of self-interest. It's not one of self-responsibility. Christians claim all the time, no, in the Bible it says this, we have to be responsible completely. Not really, though. Because if you were completely responsible, you don't need God. You don't. So whether God exists or not is irrelevant. I would say, ultimately, to have a world that's best for all, you can't accept a God. Because what is a God? And like the bishop said, like a few others said, well, you have this idea that God is like this supreme type being, you know, like the Greek gods, like this ultimate being that's superior. I'm like, well, what the fuck do you think everyone thinks God is? Because definitely none of them have read St. Thomas Aquinas. Definitely nobody thinks that's what God is. Not most people. They think it's the supreme thing that gives you a get out of jail free card where you don't have to change. As long as you accept it, you get into heaven, and you're hoping that when you get there, because somehow magic happens, because you've accepted God, your ways will just change. But then you don't have free will. It's like, well, no, I just won't want to anymore. No, if you want to now do something bad, and then you die, but you accept God as the authority, when you go to heaven, has the wanting to do the things that are not best changed? Have you changed that within yourself? Or have you just put the responsibility on God that he will change your heart? You see, it's at every level, it's just a lack of accepting self-responsibility for who you are and what you create in this world. So, if you're having an existential crisis, just realize the only way out is self-forgiveness, let go of the fear of loss, take responsibility for this world. You need a purpose. That's why you're in an existential crisis. And I know we didn't really go into existential crises in this particular stream, but if anybody's feeling that existential anxiety, just realize you have to come to terms with the fact that you're here, you're responsible for reality around you. You can't change it today by yourself. So your purpose has to then become, I've got to find other people that are serious about reality, that want to take a mature approach to reality and consider what's best for everybody. And we've got to find a way to align things in this world where everyone actually is considering that as their starting point. And when you look at the world around you, that seems impossible. But if we learned any lessons from Job or Moses, isn't the whole lesson that we persevere no matter what and we strive for something higher? But is that higher thing that we're striving for God? Or is it the ultimate expression of being the best we can be and doing the best things here on earth and supporting others to be that best expression of themselves? Is the striving for some external object's acceptance, or is the striving for something higher simply us really being who we really are and expressing that fully? So I'll leave you with that, and I will see you on the next one.